My name's Aiden. I'm 27, live a quiet life working remote IT, and I've always been the background character in my own family. You know the type, someone everyone nods at out of obligation but rarely invites into the real conversations. And I used to think I was just being sensitive, that maybe I wasn't putting in enough effort. But then my brother got married, and everything clicked. Every suspicion, every quiet moment of being left out, every second guess, I finally realized I wasn't imagining it. They really did see me as optional. To understand how we got there, I have to rewind a bit. My brother Josh and I are 2 years apart. He's older, louder, smoother. The golden child. Always has been. I was the weird kid with headphones and a laptop while Josh played quarterback and got his face on the school's promotional posters. My parents didn't even hide the favoritism. When Josh got into college, they threw a party, invited neighbors, printed custom cupcakes. When I got my acceptance letter, they were on vacation. I told them over text. Still, I tried. I showed up. Birthdays, holidays, reunions, I was always there, quiet in the corner but present. When Josh started dating Chloe, I was happy for him. Genuinely. She seemed sweet at first, kind of ditzy, but harmless. The first time we met, she looked me up and down and said, "Wow, you guys are nothing alike," and laughed like that was a normal thing to say. But whatever, right? I'm used to that. Josh brought her to every family event, and slowly, she carved out her place like she'd been born into it. My parents adored her. My cousins followed her around like she was some kind of influencer. Meanwhile, I became even more invisible, somehow. When they got engaged, Josh called me himself. That was rare. I assumed it was to ask me to be in the wedding party. Best man. Maybe not, but a groomsman at least. We were brothers. But no. He just said, "Hey, we're sending invites next week. Just wanted to make sure you got yours." That was it. No role, no ask, just an invite like I was a distant coworker. I told myself not to overthink it. The wedding was set for late spring, at some countryside vineyard about an hour out. Gorgeous place, by the pictures. I rented a suit, bought a nice gift, a custom-designed espresso machine engraved with their initials. Chloe was a caffeine fanatic, and I'd saved up for it. I even had it wrapped in this sleek black and gold paper with a satin ribbon. It felt like my last shot to be seen, you know? Like maybe if I gave the perfect gift, they'd finally say something like, "Hey, Aiden, we really appreciate you." The day arrived. I drove up, alone, in my hand-me-down sedan while everyone else posted Instagram stories from their shared limo bus. I wasn't bitter, just used to it. I checked in at the welcome table where a young woman glanced at my name, then blinked twice and said, "Oh, you're Aiden, right? Yeah, here's your place card." Except it wasn't a card. It was a sticky note. My name, written in blue pen, slightly smudged. No last name, no table number. Just Aiden. I blinked, thinking maybe it was some joke or a placeholder. She pointed to the left side of the venue and said, "You're right over there, just past the restrooms." I followed her gesture and walked around the corner, and there it was. A folding chair. Not even one of the padded white ones everyone else had. This was a gray metal one that squeaked when I touched it. It faced the side of the building, with half a view of a brick wall and the sounds of kitchen staff clattering trays nearby. No centerpiece. No linens. Just me and the hum of the bathroom fan. I just stood there for a second, holding my gift, trying to process. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe someone messed up. I turned back, started walking toward the main reception tent, and that's when I saw Chloe standing nearby, laughing with her friends. One of them noticed me and nudged her. Chloe looked over, smirked, and said, "We figured he'd be fine out of sight." Her friends giggled like it was the punchline to an inside joke. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't a mistake. I looked around. Every distant cousin, old neighbor, and even some guy I vaguely remembered from high school had better seats. Centerpieces. Personalized name cards. Someone had even brought their dog, and it had a monogrammed bandana. But me? I got a sticky note by the restroom. My throat burned. Not from anger, at least not yet, but from this deep, nauseating feeling of being erased. Not overlooked. Erased. I walked back to the chair, set the espresso machine on it, then paused. Something in me snapped, not violently, just finally. I picked the gift back up, adjusted the ribbon, and turned toward the exit. No speech. No yelling. Just a quiet step toward reclaiming whatever dignity they'd tried to bury under that sticky note. As I reached the parking lot and unlocked my car, I heard fast footsteps behind me. "Aiden, wait up." It was Josh. His tie was loose, his face flushed, his hand out like he expected me to stop and hug him. "What are you doing?" he panted. "You're leaving." I didn't even turn all the way around. Just looked at him over my shoulder and said, "Guess I'm not family after all." He blinked like I'd slapped him. "What are you talking about?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You put me next to a bathroom, Josh. On a folding chair. With a sticky note for a name card." "That wasn't my—" "Chloe handled the seating," he stammered. "Yeah, and you let her." For a second, he said nothing. Then, as if trying to salvage it all with one throwaway line, he said, "Come on, don't make a scene. This is my wedding." I looked down at the espresso machine in my hands, then back at him. "Exactly." And then I opened my car door. But before I got in, he said something that made me pause. His voice dropped, almost uncertain now. "Wait, was that our gift?" I didn't answer. I just got in, started the engine, and pulled out. That night, I didn't go home. I drove for hours, past the city, past the lights, into the quiet black of the highway. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just thought about every time I was the last to know, the last to be invited, the last to be seen. And somewhere, between the hum of the wheels and the silence of the road, I started planning. They had no idea what that espresso machine really cost. Not just in money, in effort, in belief, in love. And they had no idea I wasn't done yet. I didn't go home for a few days. I turned off my phone, checked into a quiet cabin I'd stayed at once before during a solo trip upstate, and let the stillness settle around me. It was perched above a sleepy lake that mirrored the sky, wide, unbothered, peaceful in a way I hadn't felt in years. I sat on the deck with a blanket wrapped around me and let the espresso machine rest on the small table beside me like it was an old friend. Still perfectly wrapped. Still untouched. Every time I glanced at it, my jaw tightened a little. I wasn't angry the way people picture anger, shouting, red-faced, fist clenched. No. Mine was quiet, methodical. The kind of anger that organizes thoughts like files in a cabinet. I was calm enough to realize something important. Josh wasn't the root of this. Not alone, anyway. It had always been the family dynamic, built on favoritism, powered by silence. And Chloe? She was just the newest recruit. She didn't start the fire. She just threw gasoline on it. By the time I turned my phone back on, I had dozens of texts. Mom texted, "Hope you didn't get lost. They saved you a plate." Dad texted, "Where did you go? It was your brother's big day." Josh texted, "Hey man, I didn't know she'd put you back there. I would have fixed it. Come on." Chloe texted, "If you're going to be dramatic, just stay gone." That one made me smile. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I scrolled further and found a message from my cousin Aaron, the only one who'd ever treated me like more than just Josh's brother. It was short, but real. She texted, "I saw where they put you. That was disgusting. I'm so sorry." I responded with 2 words. "Thank you." That was all I needed from her. When I finally drove back home, it wasn't a sulk. I had a plan. And for once, it didn't involve staying quiet. First step was checking my records. You see, I've been managing the back-end systems for my parents' side business for years, billing software, client management, you name it. Nothing official, just helping out like a good son. I was never paid. I never asked to be. But I had access to everything. In fact, I was the one who fixed their site when it got hacked 2 years ago. I was the one who migrated their outdated client data to a cloud system. And I was the one who filed the documents when they forgot to update their business license. They never even said thank you. I created a quiet digital paper trail, and they never thought twice about it. Because to them, I was harmless. Background. Invisible. That was about to change. I spent a few days collecting receipts, time logs, system backups, saved versions of invoices I'd personally created. I printed them, organized them, labeled them. Not to sue them. No, I had no interest in their money. But I wanted documentation. I wanted to see it. Tangibly. I wanted them to see it too. Then I sent a single email to our family group chat, attaching a file titled, "From the Background." The email was simple. "Hi all, this document contains a detailed list of contributions I've made to the family business over the last 6 years, time, services, and technical support. It totals over 1,400 hours. I'll be sending a formal invoice to Mom and Dad for the sake of transparency. I don't expect payment. I never did. But I won't be helping going forward. If you need IT support, I can recommend some professionals. Also, Chloe, thanks for putting me by the bathroom. That helped everything finally click. Aiden, no threats. No rants. Just facts. That's what made it cut deep. The responses were frantic. Mom, Aiden, this isn't necessary. We're family. Dad, is this about the wedding? You're overreacting. Chloe, I didn't realize tech support came with an ego. Josh, please don't do this. Let's talk. I didn't reply. The next week, the family business website went down. They had no idea how to fix it. Their backup drive? It hadn't been updated in months because they assumed I'd do it like I always had. Clients started calling. Deadlines slipped. The pressure built. And I still said nothing. But that was just the start. You see, Chloe didn't know something else. Something Josh probably forgot, or maybe never knew. The espresso machine I got them? It wasn't just fancy. It was exclusive. I had a connection through a developer friend who worked with an Italian boutique brand. Each machine came with a serial number and a private registration code to activate the full warranty and features. Guess who held the code? I waited a full month. Then I logged into the machine's registration portal and deactivated it. Just like that, the touchscreen would only brew generic coffee. No personalization, no temperature settings, no voice assistant, no custom labels. Basic drip. For $1,500 worth of nothing special. I knew Chloe would lose it. A week later, I got a text from an unknown number. This is petty. Grow up. No name, of course, but I recognized the tone. I just stared at the message for a moment, then blocked it. But things didn't stop unraveling there. One of Josh's groomsmen, Nico, reached out privately. He'd seen what happened at the wedding, and apparently, he wasn't as loyal to Chloe as everyone assumed. He told me something interesting. The venue they booked? I knew it looked familiar. I'd seen that estate listed in a real estate client database I'd helped set up for one of my freelance jobs a year ago. Turns out, the vineyard wasn't a public venue. It was privately owned, and they'd booked it through a friend of a friend favor to Chloe's family. What Chloe didn't know is that the estate had recently been purchased. By me. Okay, co-purchased. A tech investor friend and I had quietly picked up 3 rural properties for an AI startup retreat concept. The vineyard was one of them. We hadn't finalized the rebranding yet, but I still had part ownership and full access to the property records, which meant I knew something Chloe didn't. Their wedding had technically been hosted on my land. And when I realized that, I knew exactly what I'd do next. I waited until a quiet Thursday morning, mid-month, far from holidays or birthdays, nothing that could distract or dilute the message. I printed a clean, embossed envelope with Chloe and Josh's names on it. No return address, just the vineyard's new logo in the corner, Juniper Crest Holdings. Inside was a letter, notarized and signed. It read, "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Carver, following a post-sale audit of property usage, we have reviewed an unauthorized event held at the Juniper Crest estate on wedding date, for which no formal venue agreement was filed nor compensation rendered to the current property owners. As per policy, unauthorized use of the estate, including commercial photography, guest occupancy, and catering activity, incurs a retroactive event fee. Please remit the enclosed invoice total of $12,800 within 30 days to avoid referral to collections. Thank you for your understanding." I had it hand-delivered by courier. Now, to be clear, I had no intention of sending this to actual collections. That would have been a legal mess. But I knew Chloe. I knew how she panicked when control slipped from her fingers. And I knew Josh well enough to be certain he'd read every word 10 times before even daring to ask for clarification. The best part? There was a waiver tucked into the guest book folder at the event. A waiver Chloe signed herself, agreeing that no fees were owed because of a handshake deal with the prior owner, which was invalid the moment the property changed hands 2 weeks before the wedding. I gave them a deadline. Then I waited. 3 days later, my phone rang. I answered it on the 4th ring. I already knew who it was. Josh's voice was strained. "Aiden, please tell me this is a joke." I didn't say anything. "We didn't know," he added, desperate now. "Chloe's uncle set it up. It was supposed to be all handled. Man, come on. You didn't think to check whose name was on the deed?" I asked calmly. "You're really charging us for our own wedding?" he asked, like I'd gone off the deep end. I laughed once, soft and sharp. "Oh, I'm not charging you. The management team is. I'm just a part owner who happened to notice a policy violation." A long pause. "Then, you're getting back at us." "No," I said. "I'm reminding you. I'm not invisible. And next time someone hands you a sticky note with my name on it, maybe don't act like you're doing me a favor." He didn't have a response to that. I let the silence stretch until he finally mumbled something about talking to Chloe and hung up. It was satisfying, but I wasn't done. A week later, I sent my parents a care package. Inside was a sleek binder, labeled "Just So You Know." It contained every invoice, every task, every piece of tech maintenance I'd done for their side business for the last 6 years. I highlighted the pages where I'd patched their site for free, where I handled tax filings they'd forgotten, and where I'd stayed up past midnight on Christmas Eve to fix their crashing payment processor. On the final page, I taped a post-it. Just one. It said, "I won't be doing any of this anymore. But I figured you might want to keep the files." I didn't expect them to thank me. I didn't expect them to respond at all. But they did. Mom called first. I didn't pick up. Then Dad left a voicemail that started with, "Now hold on. This is all very ungrateful," and ended with, "You're still part of this family, whether you like it or not." I deleted it. Then came Chloe's masterpiece. She posted a long-winded rant on Instagram about betrayal within the family, about how some people will burn everything down just to be noticed. She painted herself as the victim, humiliated, disrespected, charged for her own wedding like she hadn't literally stuffed me behind a toilet. I almost didn't respond. Almost. But I remembered something. Josh and Chloe had set up a wedding website, classy, minimalist, with a guest photo section and a public review page. So I left a 5-star review. Public. Lovely venue. Convenient restrooms and excellent acoustics for overhearing kitchen staff. Special shout out to the personalized seating arrangement. I've never felt more seen. Would recommend, if you're into ironic poetry. The post exploded. Friends from college, distant relatives, even a few of Chloe's high school acquaintances started commenting with crying laughing emojis. Someone reposted it to Facebook. Another person screenshot it and added petty king energy. Within 48 hours, Chloe disabled comments on every social platform she owned. Josh called again. This time, I answered. He didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He just sounded tired. "She's talking about getting lawyers involved. Then she should probably read the waiver she signed," I said. "You really went all in on this, huh? You let her humiliate me," I said, finally letting the calm drop. "At your wedding. You knew where my seat was. You knew how she treated me. And you did nothing." He didn't deny it. We sat there in silence for what felt like an entire season. Then he said, almost too quietly, "I thought you wouldn't care." "I didn't used to," I said. "But that's the thing about being invisible. Eventually, you stop waiting for someone to see you and start building ways to make sure they do." He never responded to that. Not then, at least. It took 3 months for everything to settle. By then, the family group chat was a ghost town. No more blurry pictures of Sunday brunches without me. No more "look what Josh and Chloe made" photos featuring charcuterie boards and smiling faces where my chair had always been empty. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just excluded, I had chosen to remove myself. And it was the most peaceful kind of silence I'd ever known. But the fallout still had its aftershocks. A few weeks after the review went viral, I got an email from a wedding blog, Real Vow. Someone had submitted my comment to them, and they wanted to do a feature on unexpected wedding drama that made the internet explode. I declined, of course. That wasn't the point. I didn't want 15 minutes of fame. I wanted 15 years of clarity. And I had it now. The espresso machine sat unopened in my kitchen for a while, still wrapped in the black and gold paper with the satin ribbon. I thought about giving it to someone, maybe Aaron, my cousin, who'd been the only one to check on me without an agenda. But in the end, I sold it. Put it up on a collector's site, explained its deactivation, and still made a decent return. I took that money and booked a flight to Tokyo. I'd always wanted to go, but never felt like I could justify the expense. It was the kind of thing Josh would do on a whim. Backpack through Southeast Asia for 3 weeks, then forget to send a postcard. Me? I needed reasons. I needed permission. But not anymore. I stayed in a capsule hotel near Shibuya, wandered the neon-lit streets, bought myself a ridiculous amount of matcha snacks, and didn't answer a single call from back home. It was the first trip I ever took where I didn't feel like I was running away from anything. I was just gone, and it was enough. When I came back, there was a letter in my mailbox. Real, handwritten, thick ivory paper, my parents' stationery. It wasn't an apology. Not exactly. But it was something. "Dear Aiden, your mother and I have been talking a lot since the wedding. I'll admit, it's been uncomfortable. Not just because of what happened, but because of what it revealed. We didn't know how left out you felt, and that's probably because we didn't bother to ask. We've always assumed you were independent, quiet, low maintenance. We thought that meant you didn't need anything from us. But now we realize that was our excuse for not giving it. We've taken a step back from helping Josh and Chloe financially. We think it's time he learns to stand on his own, the way you did. It's also made us reflect on the way we raised you both. We're not writing this to fix things, just to say we're sorry. If you're open to it, we'd like to invite you over for dinner. Just you. No agendas, no Chloe, no crowd. Just us. We'll be here. Love, Mom and Dad. I didn't cry. I didn't rush to respond. I just stared at the letter for a long time, then tucked it back in the envelope and slid it into my desk drawer. Progress, maybe. But forgiveness wasn't a switch I could flip just because someone found the light. A week later, Josh showed up at my apartment. I didn't invite him. Didn't even buzz him in. He waited by the lobby until someone else walked out, then knocked. Loud, sharp like always. When I opened the door, he looked thinner, paler, like someone had finally told him he wasn't the golden child anymore. I'm not here to argue, he said, hands raised like I might swing. I'm not even here to defend Chloe. That's new, I said. He rubbed the back of his neck. She moved out. That caught me off guard. What? She says I embarrassed her, he muttered. That I should have done more to stop you. That I picked the wrong side. And did you? I asked. He looked up. Really looked, for the first time in years. Yeah, I did. I didn't say anything. I let her treat you like a prop, he continued, his voice cracking. Like some placeholder on the guest list. And I didn't just stand there. I helped her do it. Because it was easier than confronting what we've all ignored for years. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a white envelope. This time, no threats. No invoices. I sold the espresso machine, he said. After you disabled it. Used the money to refund the vineyard invoice. I didn't want to keep anything that came from a lie. He handed me the envelope. I opened it and found a check inside. Not for the full amount, but close. It's not payment, he added. It's acknowledgement. I nodded. You can keep it. Why? Because this isn't about money, I said. It never was. He stood there, unsure what to do with his hands, with himself. Do you hate me? He asked finally. I looked past him, through the hall window where sunlight spilled onto the floor in long stripes. The kind of light that makes everything look honest. No, I said. But I don't trust you. Not yet. He nodded. Fair. He turned to leave, then paused. Can I ask one thing? Sure. Did you really have to put that review on our wedding website? I smiled. You put me next to a toilet, Josh. That review was the nicest thing I wrote. He laughed. Just once. And for the first time in a long time, it wasn't smug or condescending. It was just human. He left without asking to come back in. And that was a start. Over the next few months, things didn't magically heal. My parents invited me to that dinner, and I went, but I brought my own plate. Literally. A little ceramic dish I'd bought in Tokyo. A quiet reminder that I didn't need to be served. I could serve myself. Josh and I text occasionally. Not brothers again. Not yet. But men trying to meet each other halfway. Chloe? I haven't heard from her since. She blocked me on everything, even LinkedIn. Which, frankly, was a favor. The family still whispers. Aaron says they're confused. Divided. Unsure who to side with. But I don't care about sides anymore. Because for the first time in my life, I'm not the background. I'm the author. And I've started writing chapters where I'm not waiting to be invited into the story. I'm already there. Christmas dinners used to mean something to me. The smell of roasted turkey, pine candles flickering on the mantle, and that fake cheer my parents always insisted on, like we weren't a family held together by silence and competition. My name's Gary. I'm 38. Married to a woman far kinder than I deserve. And father to an 8-year-old boy who still believes everyone means what they say. I wish I did. Growing up, my brother, Ryan, was the golden child. The type of kid who'd get grounded for an hour, then be handed a new gaming console because mom didn't want to crush his spirit. I, on the other hand, got lectured for breathing too loud. It became a pattern that never stopped. Birthdays, graduations, even funerals somehow turned into celebrations of Ryan's potential. By the time we were adults, he still lived off them, still took their money, still called Dad every other week asking for a little help. And they gave it. Every time. I stopped expecting anything from them around the time I bought my first house. It wasn't easy. Years of long shifts, working 2 jobs, skipping nights out, but I did it. When I told them, Dad said, "You must be proud of yourself," in that tone that really meant, "Don't expect a pat on the back." Ryan, meanwhile, got a brand new SUV that same year to help him get back on his feet. He was 29. Still, I kept showing up. For my son's sake. I wanted him to have grandparents who cared, cousins to play with, memories that didn't come with bitterness attached. So when Mom called and said, "Christmas dinner's at our place again, 6 o'clock sharp," I agreed. My wife, Lena, baked her famous pecan pie, and our son, Jacob, drew a handmade card for his grandparents that said, "Merry Christmas, I love you." He colored every letter carefully, even glued on glitter. We arrived 10 minutes early, gift bags in hand. Ryan's family was already there, laughing loudly around the tree. His wife, Allison, wore a dress that looked like it came from a fashion ad, and their kids were ripping open presents even before dessert. Mom hovered beside them with her phone out, recording every squeal. "Gary, you made it," she said, voice warm but eyes flicking past me toward Lena. "Oh, that pie smells heavenly. Put it in the kitchen, dear." I smiled, pretending not to notice that Ryan's family had stockings hanging by the fireplace, embroidered names and all. Ours weren't there. I told myself it didn't matter. It shouldn't matter. Dinner went smoothly enough at first. The usual small talk, the usual one-upping. Ryan talked about his new business venture, which, from what I gathered, was him trying to flip used cars out of Dad's garage. Mom called it entrepreneurial. Lena and I exchanged a glance and tried to keep our smiles polite. When it came time for gifts, Mom clapped her hands. "All right, everyone, let's do presents before dessert." Ryan's kids squealed as she handed them each glossy envelopes and wrapped boxes. "Open them," she urged. Out came the newest iPhones, each in a different color, followed by stacks of cash that made my eyebrows rise. Even Lena gasped quietly. "That's for your education, sweethearts," Dad said proudly. "Or whatever you want. You've earned it." Jacob sat patiently beside me, holding the card he'd made. He waited for his turn. When Mom finished passing things out, she looked around the tree, then shrugged. "I think that's everything." Jacob looked up, confused. "Grandma? Grandpa? Did I miss mine?" Dad chuckled, not kindly. "We didn't get anything for him," he said. "He's not really part of this family." The air left the room. Even Ryan stopped smiling. Lena's fork slipped from her hand and clattered against the plate. I stared at Dad, waiting for him to say he was joking. He didn't. Mom tried to laugh it off, waving her hand. "Oh, don't take it so seriously. You live far away, we didn't think." But she stopped when she saw my face. I looked down at Jacob, who was biting his lip so hard it trembled. He held the card tighter, the glitter from his fingers smudging across the paper. I put my hand on his shoulder. "Let's go, bud." "Gary, come on," Mom said quickly. "Don't make a scene." I didn't answer. I helped Jacob with his coat, thanked Lena quietly for keeping calm, and walked out. The cold December air hit me like a wall, sharp and clean. In the car, Jacob finally asked, "Did I do something wrong, Dad?" "No," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "You did everything right." When we got home, I tucked him into bed. He fell asleep fast. Kids have that gift, even when their hearts are heavy. I sat in my office for a long time, staring at the spreadsheet on my screen. Years of payments, transfers, and auto drafts, all tied to one thing, my parents' accounts. See, I'd been managing their finances for a while. It started innocently. Dad asked me to take care of the boring stuff when his back went out. I set up everything: their mortgage, insurance, utilities, even Ryan's business loan that was quietly funneling through their joint account. Every payment ran through my company's system, automated and tidy. They never bothered to look at how it worked, just that it did. Until that night. By the time the clock hit midnight, I had everything pulled up. One by one, I began turning things off. The mortgage payment, paused. The car leases, canceled. The credit cards, frozen. I left a single transfer scheduled, $0. Memo line reading, family priorities. I didn't feel anger. Not yet. Just a cold, precise calm. The next morning, I woke up to 23 missed calls. Then 32. By noon, it was 51. Mom first, then Dad, then Ryan. Lena peeked into my office. "They've been calling nonstop. Are you going to answer?" I shook my head. Not yet. By late afternoon, the tone changed. From confusion to fury. Dad's text popped up on my phone. Mortgage company says payment bounced. Did you mess something up? A few minutes later, both cars are locked. We can't even get into them. Fix this, Gary. Then, you think you're better than us now? You forget who raised you. That one stayed on my screen for a while. I could almost hear his voice in the words, sharp, self-righteous, offended that I dared disturb the order of things. When the phone rang again, I finally picked up. Gary, Dad barked before I could say a word. What did you do? I kept my tone steady. You might want to check your accounts, Dad. Everything you've been living off, it's done. You don't get to humiliate my kid and expect me to pay your bills the next morning. He sputtered. You can't just. I can, I said quietly. And I did. There was a long silence on the other end. Then, softly, almost disbelievingly, you think you're better than us now, huh? I didn't answer. He continued, voice shaking with rage. You think money makes you special? You're nothing without this family. Nothing. For the first time in years, I laughed. Not out of amusement, but realization. Then I guess you'll find out what nothing feels like. I hung up. Lena was standing in the doorway, arms crossed. That was him. Yeah, I said. And it's just getting started. Because shutting down their finances was only the beginning. What came next would tear open every lie they'd built, every favor they owed, every secret they'd hidden behind the illusion of family. But that part, well, that's where things really started to unravel. The next few days felt oddly quiet. Too quiet. The kind of silence that comes after a storm, but before you realize the storm was only the first wave. I knew my parents wouldn't just let it go. They'd built their entire lives around control, financial, emotional, social. To them, cutting the money wasn't just cruel, it was rebellion. And they didn't tolerate rebellion, especially from me. On the second day, my mom called Lena. Not me, Lena. Sweetheart. Her voice began. That syrupy tone she always used when she wanted something. I don't know what's gotten into Gary, but this little tantrum of his needs to stop. We have bills due, the mortgage company's been calling, and your father can't even drive his car. Lena, bless her, tried to stay civil. Maybe this is something you should discuss with him directly. Oh, I tried, Mom said quickly. He hung up. I don't know what story he's told you, but he's always been dramatic. Then, in a lower tone, he takes after my side of the family, I suppose. Sensitive. Lena later told me she bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. Your mom really doesn't understand boundaries, she said that night. Or irony. I smiled without humor. She's always believed other people's feelings are inconveniences to be managed. The third day brought Ryan. Or rather, Ryan's voice through my intercom. I was in my home office reviewing contracts when the buzzer sounded. I ignored it, assuming it was a delivery. Then it buzzed again, longer. Then came the pounding on the door. Gary, open up, man. Lena peeked from the kitchen. Is that? Yep. I opened the door just enough to see his face. He looked disheveled, like he hadn't slept much. You can't be serious, he said. Mom and Dad are freaking out. They said you cut off everything. I did. He blinked. Why? You trying to make some point? No, Ryan. I'm done funding people who think humiliating my son is a family tradition. He scoffed. Oh, come on. Dad was joking. You know how he is. Joking? I repeated, my voice steady. Ryan, my kid cried himself to sleep because his grandfather told him he wasn't part of the family. He shifted uncomfortably but didn't apologize. Instead, he said, look, man, they're old. They say dumb stuff sometimes. But shutting them out? That's harsh. You know they don't have the savings for all this. I leaned against the doorframe. Whose fault is that? They've been supporting you for years. His eyes narrowed. Hey, I never asked for. Yes, you did, I interrupted. I have the transfers to prove it. That hit him. He stepped back slightly, his face turning defensive. You don't get it. They wanted to help. They said it made them happy. Of course they did, I said. Because it gave them control. And you were the easiest one to control. He looked like he wanted to argue, but the truth of it sat heavy between us. Ryan, I said finally, I'm not your enemy. But I'm not going to keep playing the scapegoat. You can tell them whatever you want, but this ends now. He shook his head slowly. You always thought you were smarter than everyone. Guess we'll see how smart you are when Mom tells the rest of the family about this. Then he turned and walked away. That was the first ripple. By the end of the week, the ripples turned into waves. My aunt texted me. Your mother's heartbroken. She says you're trying to destroy them. My cousin left a voicemail saying, Gary, you've always been dramatic, but this is low. It was like watching a play I'd seen 100 times. Mom spreading her version of the story before anyone else could speak. That was her gift, turning every situation into a tragedy where she was the misunderstood victim and I was the cold, ungrateful son. I didn't respond. Not to anyone. But Lena started noticing the strain. "Your phone hasn't stopped buzzing for 3 days," she said one evening, folding laundry beside me. "Are you sure you don't want to say something? Just to clarify." I shook my head. They don't want clarification. They want control. If I defend myself, they'll twist it. I've played that game before. Jacob walked into the room holding one of his drawings, a picture of our family, but this time, it was just the three of us. No grandparents, no cousins. "Is this okay?" he asked quietly. I knelt down. "Of course it is, buddy. Why wouldn't it be?" He shrugged. "Grandma used to say family pictures had to have everyone." Lena looked away, eyes glistening. I smiled gently. "You get to draw whoever makes you feel loved. That's what family is." He nodded, satisfied, and ran off to show the dog. That moment, that tiny, innocent moment, was what kept me from second-guessing myself. Because as much as I missed the idea of family, I knew the real thing had never existed for me. But then, things escalated. One morning, I received a call from the mortgage company handling my parents' account. "Mr. Hayes," the representative said politely, "we're contacting you regarding the defaulted payment for the property under your management." "I'm no longer managing that account," I said. "It's under their name." "I understand," she replied, "but your signature is still listed as the financial guarantor." I froze. "Excuse me." She explained, "A few years ago, when my parents refinanced their home, Dad had convinced me to co-sign just for the paperwork. He said it was temporary, that once everything was approved, they'd take my name off. I trusted him. And of course, they never did. So technically, I was still liable." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Lena came in just as I set the phone down. "What happened?" "They never removed me from the mortgage," I said quietly. "If they default, it affects my credit." She frowned. "That's calculated. It's how they operate," I said bitterly. "They tie you in so you can't leave." And sure enough, within 24 hours, I got another call, this time from Dad. "Gary, we need to talk," he said gruffly. "The bank's saying weird things. They froze our accounts. You're still tied to some of this mess, so you better fix it before it hurts you too." I almost laughed. "You mean before it hurts you?" He didn't even deny it. "You think you can just walk away from your family? That's not how this works." "How does it work then?" "You insult my kid, I keep paying your bills." "You're overreacting," he snapped. "It was a joke. We didn't mean anything by it. You always twist everything into an attack. You called my son not part of this family. What else was I supposed to think?" He huffed. "You've gotten soft. That wife of yours has poisoned your mind. We raised you to be stronger than this." "Stronger?" I repeated quietly. "You raised me to endure humiliation," with a smile. "I'm done." Before he could reply, I hung up again. But something in his tone lingered, something smug, like he knew something I didn't. That night, I found out what. Lena walked into my office holding a stack of envelopes. "These came from your parents' address," she said. "You should look at this." Inside were overdue notices, utilities, insurance, property tax, all forwarded to my mailing address. And one letter caught my eye, a notice from a local credit union. It listed my name alongside my father's on a shared credit line I'd never opened. I felt my pulse quicken. They'd used my identity. Not stolen. Exactly. Just borrowed in the way they always borrowed, assuming I'd never say no. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about disrespect at dinner anymore. This was about how they'd been using me for years. Every check I'd written, every temporary favor, every "you'll get it back eventually" promise, it was all part of a system designed to keep me entangled. And now that I was pulling away, they were panicking because the foundation was crumbling. Over the next few days, I quietly began digging through old records. Email threads, account authorizations, digital copies of forms I'd signed years ago. The deeper I looked, the uglier it got. They had linked my business accounts as guarantors for several of their loans. They'd even used my tax ID once to claim a consulting deduction on their property. Lena sat beside me, reading each file with growing disbelief. "Gary, this is insane." I nodded slowly. "It's not insane. It's calculated." I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I finally saw the truth for what it was. They hadn't just disrespected me. They'd built their comfort on my name, and somewhere deep down, they believed I owed them for it. By the end of that week, the calls stopped, which worried me more than when they were constant. When my parents went silent, it meant they were planning something. Sure enough, silence didn't last long. A few days later, I received an invitation in the mail, a family dinner, to clear the air, as Mom's flowery handwriting put it. She even added a little heart next to her signature, as if that erased everything. Lena raised an eyebrow. Are you going? Oh, I'm going, I said. But not for the reason they think. Because if they wanted to clear the air, I was finally ready to bring every secret into the open. And I wasn't leaving without answers. The night of the family dinner felt heavier than it should have. The air was cold, sharp, and eerily still. The kind of winter night that makes your breath hang in the air longer than it should. I remember standing outside their house, looking at the same porch light that had flickered since I was a teenager. Same cracked driveway, same curtains in the window. It all looked unchanged, but I wasn't the same kid walking and hoping to be accepted. Lena squeezed my hand. You don't have to do this, she said softly. I know, I replied. But if I don't, they'll never stop. I parked across the street. Ryan's shiny SUV was already in the driveway, parked crooked like it owned the place. Inside, I could see silhouettes moving around the dining room. Mom's fluttery gestures, Dad's stiff posture, Ryan's head tilted back in laughter. Everything looked rehearsed. When we walked in, the smell of roast and wine hit immediately. It was almost nostalgic, except nostalgia doesn't hurt your stomach. Gary, Mom exclaimed, as if nothing had ever happened. You came. Oh, Lena, you look beautiful as always. And how's little Jacob? He's at home, Lena said carefully. With a sitter. Oh, Mom said, her smile faltering for a second. Well, I suppose that's for the best. Things got emotional last time. Emotional. That was her word for humiliation. Dad didn't even get up. He sat at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes fixed on me. Sit, he said simply. We took our seats. Ryan was across from me, eating olives like nothing was wrong. So, Mom began brightly. We all said some things we regret, didn't we? Did we? I asked, keeping my tone calm. She hesitated. Well, I mean, your father's joke might have come out wrong. It wasn't a joke, I said. He meant it. Dad's lips twitched. You can't prove what I meant. I don't need to, I replied. It was clear enough for everyone in the room. Ryan sighed, leaning back. This is exactly what I said would happen. He's not here to reconcile, Mom. He's here to make a point. I turned to him. You told her that? He smirked. She told me everything. You've been acting like you're the only one who ever got mistreated. You think you're the hero in this little drama. Ryan, Lena said, you weren't there. You didn't see what happened to Jacob. He waved her off. You're making it sound worse than it was. Dad was being. Stop, I said quietly. If you say Dad was being Dad, I'm walking out right now. The room fell silent. Mom's fork clinked against her plate. Then, in a tone that was half apology and half condescension, she said, Gary, you've always been sensitive. You take things to heart. I almost laughed. You mean I take it personally when my son is told he's not family? Yeah, I guess I do. Dad cleared his throat. You've had your say. You made your point by cutting off the money. Fine, but you've made your mother miserable. Enough's enough. Restart the payments, and we'll move on. I looked up slowly. You think this is about money? It's always about money, he shot back. Don't pretend otherwise. Without you, sure, things are tight, but we'll survive. It's just easier when everyone does their part. Everyone, I repeated, meaning me. He shrugged. You're the one who has it. It's not like your brother can help. Ryan bristled. Hey, that's not fair. It's true, Dad said flatly. You've never been good with money. For a second, I almost pitied Ryan. Almost. Then Dad turned to me again. Look, you're successful. You make what, 200 grand a year? Probably more. You wouldn't even notice what we take. You should be grateful we gave you the discipline to earn it. I stared at him, stunned. Grateful? Of course, he said matter-of-factly. If we hadn't pushed you, you'd still be some underachiever. You owe us everything you have. There it was, the line I'd been expecting. Lena tensed beside me. You really believe that, don't you? Mom leaned forward, voice gentle but patronizing. Sweetheart, parents give their lives for their children. It's only natural for children to give back when they can. I looked at her carefully. You mean when they're allowed to be part of the family? Her smile froze. The tension thickened until you could almost hear it hum. Then, slowly, Dad pushed a folder across the table. You want this to be fair? Fine. Let's make it fair. I frowned, opening it. Inside were printed pages, loan documents, property transfers, and a new mortgage contract. My name was on every one. What is this? I asked. Compromise, he said. You sign those, everything goes back to normal. You can stop worrying about us, and we'll stop bothering you. Simple. Lena leaned closer, scanning the papers. Gary, this says you're transferring your secondary property to them. I looked up sharply. My rental? The one I bought. Dad shrugged. It's sitting empty. We take good care of it. Think of it as repayment. Repayment. That word burned. I pushed the folder back. No. His voice hardened. It's not a request. It's not happening. For a second, no one breathed. Then Mom spoke again, her voice low and cold. You're really going to do this to us? After everything? What everything? I asked, trying to keep my voice even. The years you ignored me for Ryan? The Christmas you gave him a car and told me, we'll see next year? Or maybe the time you told my wife she wasn't the right fit for this family? Mom's face twisted. You're twisting things again, Gary. No, Lena said, her voice rising for the first time. He's not. You're just not used to him saying no. Dad slammed his hand on the table. Enough. I'm done with this attitude. Either you sign or we're done with you. I met his gaze. Then we're done. He froze. For once, he hadn't expected defiance. Mom stood abruptly, her chair scraping. Fine, she said sharply. If that's how you want it, you'll regret it. She left the room, heels clicking down the hall. Lena whispered, Gary, let's go. But before we could stand, Ryan's voice cut through the silence. You really think you're untouchable, huh? I turned. His smirk was gone. You think they're bad people, but you've been using them too. You've had access to their accounts for years. If anyone looks, it's going to look like you stole from them. I stared at him, realizing what he was implying. What are you talking about? He leaned back, smug. Dad told me everything. You've been managing their finances, right? Their accounts, bills, everything under your system. That's access. That's control. If the right person looks at the right numbers, it's not going to look like you're the victim. My stomach sank. You wouldn't. Oh, I wouldn't, he said, but Dad might. Lena's eyes widened. You forged his signature, didn't you? Ryan laughed. Please. You think Dad can't sign his own name? That's when I realized what they'd done. Those papers in the folder weren't new. They were pre-signed. The signatures were already there, neat and identical. Dad's voice was calm again, almost too calm. You're not as clever as you think, Gary. You set up those accounts. You think anyone's going to believe we were the ones misusing your information? You have access. You have motive. And you just admitted you shut down our finances out of revenge. Lena's hand tightened on my arm. You're threatening me, I said quietly. Not threatening, Dad said, leaning back. Just giving you a chance to fix your mistake before it ruins your life. I looked between them, their faces so calm, so confident, as if they'd already decided the story that would ruin me. I stood slowly. You know what the difference is between us? Dad tilted his head. What? When you betray family, you call it love. When I protect mine, you call it revenge. Then I turned to leave. Mom's voice followed me from the hallway, sharp and cold. You walk out that door, and we'll make sure everyone knows what kind of man you really are. I didn't look back. Outside, the cold hit me hard. Lena's breath came out in shaky clouds. Gary, they're setting you up. Those papers. I know, I said. They're going to make it look like I've been stealing from them. She gripped my arm. What are you going to do? I stared at the house behind us, the warm windows glowing against the dark. I'm going to prove them wrong, I said quietly. And this time, I'm not playing defense. Because this wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was war. The following week felt like I was walking through fog. Not the soft, cinematic kind that drifts lazily over a field, but the heavy kind that blinds you, presses against your chest, and makes you doubt every step. I thought I'd left that house behind when I shut the door that night. I thought walking away would give me peace. But peace doesn't come easily when you're being hunted by people who know exactly where your weak spots are. It started small, little things that didn't make sense. On Monday morning, my business account login failed. Incorrect credentials, it said. I tried again. Same result. I reset the password, logged back in, and noticed something off. There were 3 unauthorized attempts to transfer funds, each one denied by the bank's security system. The source? My parents' old joint account, which I'd disconnected weeks earlier. I stared at the screen for a long time, a pit forming in my stomach. Then Tuesday came. My accountant called. "Gary, did you file a tax amendment recently?" "No," I said slowly. "Well," he continued, "the IRS just flagged an adjustment request linked to your business ID. It's claiming dependency deductions for 2 additional individuals, your parents' names, specifically. They're trying to list themselves under your filings." I felt my chest tighten. "That's illegal." "I know," he said. "I already notified them. But it's going to trigger an audit." "An audit?" He hesitated. "Yes, automatic. And it's not random. They're going to go through your accounts, your transfers, everything tied to their records. If they're trying to make you look like you've been moving money around, this will make it messy." I hung up and sat in silence. The sound of my own heartbeat filled the room. That evening, Lena found me sitting at my desk, staring at my monitor without moving. "Talk to me," she said quietly. I rubbed my temples. "They're framing me." Her expression darkened. "What do you mean?" "They've started planting financial evidence, fake deductions, suspicious transfers. It's smart. They know the system better than I thought." "You think Ryan's helping them?" I nodded slowly. "He's always been reckless. But this has his fingerprints all over it. He's tech-savvy enough to make it look legitimate." Lena sat beside me and placed her hand over mine. "You didn't do anything wrong, Gary. You can prove it." "Maybe," I said quietly. "But they're counting on the damage being done before I can." That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt amplified. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock, the faint wind against the window. My mind kept replaying that dinner, those smug faces, that folder full of lies. By Wednesday morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Unknown numbers. Voicemails. I ignored them until one came from a private investigator, hired by my parents. "This is Mr. King," the voice said. "I've been authorized to reach out regarding an alleged misuse of power of attorney involving Mr. and Mrs. Hayes. They're accusing you of accessing and redirecting funds from their accounts without consent." I froze. Power of attorney. I'd handled that paperwork years ago when Dad injured his back. He'd insisted I take over financial management for convenience. It was all legitimate back then, but they'd twisted it now, turning a legal responsibility into a weapon. I called the investigator back. "Mr. King, I didn't misuse anything. I managed their accounts at their request." He sighed. "That may be true, sir, but they're providing documentation that suggests otherwise. Signed forms, statements, even call records." "Forged," I said immediately. "They're forged." "I'm not saying you're guilty," he replied evenly. "I'm just telling you that they're serious. They've already filed preliminary paperwork with their attorney." When I hung up, my hands were trembling. Lena stood at the doorway, her face pale. "What now?" "They've gone nuclear," I said. That afternoon, I went to my lawyer, a man named Clayton who'd handled my company's contracts for years. He listened without interrupting as I explained everything. The humiliation, the shutdown, the fake documents, the accusations. When I finished, he exhaled deeply. "Gary, this is complicated. Tell me something I don't know. They're not just trying to embarrass you. They're trying to make a case that you financially exploited them. It's elder abuse, on paper. It's serious." I blinked. "Elder abuse?" He nodded grimly. "It's a stretch, but it's the kind of claim that gets traction, especially when they're retired and you're their son. Public sympathy's not on your side here. So what do I do?" "First," he said, leaning forward, "we gather evidence. You said you have access logs, records of transactions, authorization emails." "Yes, all of it." "Good. Back it up to multiple locations. And don't contact them directly again. Anything you say can be used to frame intent." I nodded slowly. "You think they'd actually go through with this?" He hesitated. "From what you've told me, yes. They sound vindictive enough." When I got home, Lena was waiting at the kitchen table, Jacob beside her coloring quietly. The moment she saw my face, she knew. "They're really doing it," I said softly. She didn't say anything, just stood and wrapped her arms around me. I buried my face in her shoulder, inhaling the faint scent of soap and cinnamon. For a few seconds, I let myself breathe. But even in that comfort, the weight didn't lift. Because deep down, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge for cutting them off. It was punishment for daring to stand up to them at all. By Thursday, the rumors started spreading. An old friend from my hometown, messaged me on Facebook. "Hey man, your parents are saying you took advantage of them. Is everything okay?" Another message came from a distant cousin. "I can't believe what they're saying. Did you really freeze their accounts and keep their savings?" I stared at the screen in disbelief. They were poisoning everyone's perception before I even had a chance to speak. The real blow came that night. Jacob's school held its winter showcase, a small event with music and crafts. He was so excited. He made a cardboard rocket ship and begged me to come early. We were halfway through the event when I saw her, Mom, standing near the back with Ryan beside her. My stomach dropped. Jacob waved from the stage, beaming, unaware of the tension brewing. Mom spotted us and walked over, a saccharine smile on her face. "Gary," she said sweetly, "I didn't expect to see you here." Lena stiffened beside me. "You shouldn't be here." "Oh, relax," Mom said. "We just came to see our grandson." Dad wasn't with them, but Ryan smirked in that way he always did when he thought he'd already won. "Leave," I said quietly. "Now." Mom's expression hardened. "You don't tell me when I can see my grandson. He deserves to know his family, no matter what lies you're spreading." "Lies?" Lena snapped. "You're the ones dragging his name through the mud." "Enough," I hissed, glancing around as parents began whispering. Mom leaned closer, her voice low and venomous. "You can try to ruin us, Gary, but you'll only ruin yourself. People are starting to ask questions, and when the truth comes out, you'll have no one." I felt something inside me crack. Not anger, not sadness, just emptiness. For years, I convinced myself that somewhere, deep down, they cared. That they were flawed but redeemable. But standing there, surrounded by fake smiles and quiet whispers, I realized that love, real love, wasn't in their vocabulary. Control was. Power was. That night, after Jacob went to bed, Lena found me sitting in the dark living room. She didn't turn on the lights. She just sat beside me in silence until I finally spoke. "I think I'm done trying," I said. "Trying what?" "To fix them," I whispered. "To explain, to reason, to prove I'm not the villain they want me to be. I'm done." She took my hand. "Then what now?" "I walk away," I said quietly. "Completely. No contact, no explanations, no rescue when it all comes crashing down." For the first time, she didn't argue. She just nodded. Over the next few days, I closed every remaining tie, legally, financially, emotionally. I transferred the management of my company to a trusted partner, relocated my accounts, and began the long process of untangling my name from every joint record. But even as I built walls, a part of me felt hollow. I'd lost something, not just my parents, but the illusion that someday they might see me for who I was instead of what I could give them. Rock bottom wasn't a single moment. It was the slow realization that even when you've done everything right, the people you love most can still make you feel like you're standing in quicksand. And yet, beneath that grief, a small ember began to flicker. Because if they wanted to play dirty, they'd forgotten one thing. No one knew their financial secrets better than I did. And if they wanted to destroy me, I could make sure they went down first. But I stayed quiet, calm, patient. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't striking back right away. It's waiting until the whole world is watching. The first thing I learned about rebuilding your life after being betrayed by family is this. It doesn't happen in a blaze of triumph. It happens in silence. Early mornings, late nights, quiet choices no one sees. After cutting contact, I expected to feel free. Instead, I felt empty. Weeks went by without a word from them. No calls, no texts, no sudden appearances at Jacob's school. Just quiet. The kind that makes you suspicious. But I used that silence. I started by reclaiming control of my name, my finances, my reputation. I met with Clayton, my lawyer, nearly every day for 2 weeks. Together, we built what he called a fortress. Every document, every email, every transaction from the past decade, we collected and cataloged everything. We found patterns, too. Dozens of repayments they'd promised but never sent. Withdrawals labeled as family gifts that were actually personal expenses. In one folder alone, I found proof that they'd used my credit line to buy a $45,000 vehicle Ryan claimed was his business investment. "This is gold," Clayton said, scrolling through the files. "If they try to take you down legally, these records will crush them." But he wasn't done. "Gary, if you want to go further, we can. You have the right to sue for identity misuse, fraud, and defamation." You could win easily. I looked at the papers spread across his desk. Years of manipulation, dressed up as love and obligation. Not yet, I said. Let them keep digging their own hole. Because they would. People like my parents always do. While that storm quietly brewed, I focused on something else, my company. I'd built it from the ground up, a small financial consulting firm that handled automation for mid-sized businesses. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same systems I'd used to help my parents manage their bills had become the foundation for something real, something honest. After months of chaos, I threw myself into work again. Late nights turned into breakthroughs. We secured 2 major contracts, one with a European logistics company, another with a healthcare startup. Within 3 months, revenue doubled. By summer, we were in talks for a merger that could triple our value. Lena noticed the change before I did. "You're sleeping again," she said one morning, smiling as she handed me coffee. "You even smiled in your sleep last night." "It's been a while." I laughed softly. "Guess I'm remembering what peace feels like." Jacob thrived, too. Without the constant tension, he opened up more. His teachers said he was participating, laughing, even leading group projects. One day, he came home holding a drawing of a rocket labeled "Me and Dad." I kept it pinned above my desk. But as life improved, small reminders of the past still lingered. Rumors occasionally popped up online, subtle, bitter comments on social media. My mother's words, no doubt, filtered through relatives who still believed her stories. But this time, I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself or post cryptic messages. I let silence do the talking. Instead, I invested that energy elsewhere. I began mentoring small business owners, people trying to break free from dependency, from toxic ties that kept them small. I didn't tell them my story, not at first. I just listened, helped them set up systems, taught them how to protect their assets and independence. It felt good, purposeful. Lena once told me, maybe this was the point of all that pain, to make you into the kind of person who helps others avoid it. Maybe she was right. Then, out of nowhere, life handed me something unexpected. A journalist from a business magazine reached out. She wanted to do a feature on entrepreneurs who'd built successful companies while overcoming personal adversity. I almost said no. But when she asked about the lessons behind your resilience, something in me shifted. We met in a quiet cafe downtown. She was kind, sharp-eyed, and deeply curious. "You've grown a business that values transparency in an industry notorious for secrets," she said. "That's rare. Was that intentional?" "Yes," I said after a pause. "Because I know what it's like to have people you trust hide things from you." She leaned forward. "Family." I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah. Let's just say I learned the hard way that control and care aren't the same thing." She smiled knowingly. "That's powerful. Mind if I quote that?" I agreed. The article came out 2 weeks later. From betrayal to breakthrough. How Gary Hayes turned chaos into clarity. It wasn't a pity piece. It was thoughtful, empowering, even inspiring. And though I hadn't named names, the message was clear to anyone who knew the story. I had survived, and I was thriving. That's when the ripple effects began. Clients started calling, wanting to work with someone who understood trust. A podcast invited me to speak about business integrity. Even a university reached out about guest lecturing. For the first time, my name wasn't tied to my parents. It was tied to something I'd built entirely on my own. Lena beamed when I told her. "You realize this is exactly the kind of redemption arc your parents never believed in, right?" I grinned. "That's what makes it perfect." But beneath that success, I was still quietly preparing. Every spare hour I had, I went through documents, my parents' old financials, my brother's shell companies, their joint ventures. What I found was astonishing. They hadn't just been living off me, they'd been living off everyone. Unpaid loans from relatives, charity donations, they pocketed, even false insurance claims. Clayton and I documented everything. Not to destroy them, not yet, but to protect myself if they struck again. Meanwhile, Ryan's so-called business started collapsing. His flashy car was repossessed, his social media posts slowed to a trickle, and whispers spread that his partners were suing him for unpaid debts. Then came the day I knew would eventually arrive. A letter. Thick envelope, gold-trimmed, formal. The kind lawyers use when they want to sound polite about something ugly. Clayton opened it in front of me. "You're not going to believe this," he said, scanning the pages. "What now?" "They're demanding restitution," he said flatly. Your parents are claiming you owe them $120,000 in damages for emotional and financial hardship. I laughed, a short, humorless sound. They're really doing it. Oh, they're doing it, Clayton said, smirking slightly. But here's the thing. They've overplayed their hand. You've got the receipts. Every last one. Once we respond, they're finished. Let them come, I said quietly. They've already lost the only thing that mattered, the illusion of control. And I meant it, because by then, I wasn't scared anymore. Not of their lies, not of their manipulation, not even of the legal games. I had rebuilt myself piece by piece, financially, emotionally, professionally. They could throw whatever they wanted at me, but I wasn't that scared, guilt-ridden son anymore. I was a man who'd survived being torn apart by his own blood and come out stronger for it. In the months that followed, I grew faster than I ever thought possible. My company expanded into 2 new countries. Lena launched a design business that took off online, and Jacob got accepted into a STEM program he'd been dreaming about. We bought a new house, not flashy, but peaceful. Big windows, quiet street, a backyard where Jacob could build his rocket ships for real. Sometimes, when I sat out there at night, I'd catch myself wondering if my parents ever looked back and thought about what they lost, whether they regretted anything. But then I'd remind myself, regret requires empathy. And people like them never run out of excuses, they just run out of power. Still, I wasn't naive. The calm was only temporary. I could feel it, the storm circling back, the last desperate attempt they'd make to reclaim control. They'd taught me everything I needed to know about manipulation, deceit, and appearances. And I was about to use every one of those lessons against them. But not out of vengeance. Out of principle. Because for once in my life, I wasn't just surviving their chaos. I was in control of the narrative. And when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't just expose them. It would set me free completely. The letter from their lawyer didn't scare me. It confirmed what I'd been waiting for. They'd finally taken the bait. After months of silence, they'd stepped out into the open. Clayton and I sat in his office, sunlight slanting through the blinds, highlighting the piles of paperwork stacked between us. He looked up from the envelope, his expression unreadable. "Gary, this is a bluff, but a dangerous one. They're counting on you to panic and settle." I leaned back, calm. "Then let's make sure they regret sending it." He smiled faintly. "I was hoping you'd say that." For the first time since this whole mess began, I wasn't reacting. I was strategizing. That night, after Jacob went to bed, I told Lena everything. They've filed for restitution. It's bogus, but it's their opening move. She frowned. "Can they really do that?" "They can file whatever they want," I said. "Doesn't mean it'll hold. But here's the thing. They're doing it to get attention. They want me to defend myself publicly, so I look guilty either way." Lena folded her arms. "Then what's your move?" I smiled slightly. "The one they'll never see coming." Because what my parents never understood was that their obsession with appearances, status, reputation, respectability was their biggest weakness. They cared more about what the world thought of them than what was true. And I knew exactly how to use that. Over the following week, Clayton and I began crafting a legal response. Not aggressive, measured, precise, surgical. Every claim they made was countered with documentation, timestamps, and audit trails. I included verified bank logs showing their authorizations, recorded emails where they'd explicitly requested transfers, and digital signatures proving consent. But that was just the legal part. The real play happened behind the scenes. See, I'd spent the last decade in the world of financial consulting. I knew how narratives shaped trust. And my parents had built their lives on a carefully curated image, the self-made couple, generous donors, pillars of the community. Their reputation was their currency. So I went to work dismantling it, not with lies, but with the truth. Quietly, I reached out to a few key contacts. People who'd known them for years, old business partners, community board members, even their church treasurer. I didn't accuse or badmouth. I just asked questions. "Hey, did you ever get paid for that fundraiser reimbursement?" Strange, the donation receipts from their account don't match the public ledger. Maybe there's a mix-up? It didn't take long for curiosity to spread. And when curious people start digging, the truth doesn't need help. It finds its own way out. Within a month, whispers started circulating. The respectable couple who'd hosted charity galas every Christmas had apparently misreported funds. A local nonprofit quietly removed their names from its donor wall. My mother's social circle began shrinking overnight. But I wasn't done. While Clayton handled the restitution case, I was piecing together a second, much bigger file, a forensic audit of their finances from the past 5 years. I hired an external analyst, told him nothing personal, only the facts. Treat it like a corporate fraud investigation, I said. He did. And what he found made my jaw tighten. Hidden transfers. Misused social security numbers. A fake consulting firm under Ryan's name siphoning money from my parents' accounts into offshore ones. When I read the report, I almost felt pity. Almost. Because the story it told wasn't just of greed, it was desperation. They'd built their lives around money that wasn't theirs, and when I took it away, they unraveled. Clayton whistled low when he saw the documents. This isn't just defense material, Gary. This is prosecution-level evidence. Keep it sealed for now, I said. We'll use it when the time's right. Meanwhile, my success kept growing. My company finalized the merger, and with it came media attention. Suddenly, I wasn't just a small business owner. I was CEO of one of the fastest-growing automation firms in the region. Interviews, panels, guest lectures, it all came fast. One afternoon, after a business conference, I got an email from a local news network asking if I'd appear on their show to talk about integrity in modern business. I almost laughed. The timing couldn't have been more poetic. When the segment aired, I sat across from the host, calm and confident. She asked, Gary, your company's motto is transparency builds trust. What inspired that? I paused for a moment before answering. Let's just say I've seen what happens when people use trust as leverage. I built my company to prove there's another way, to show that honesty doesn't have to come last. It wasn't aimed at anyone directly, but I knew exactly who was watching. That night, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. I answered. Gary. My mother's voice snapped, sharp as ever. What was that interview supposed to mean? Good evening, Mom, I said evenly. Don't play dumb. Everyone's been calling me. They think you were talking about us. I smiled faintly. If people think that, maybe it says more about you than it does about me. You ungrateful. I hung up before she finished. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel anger, just closure. But then came the final setup. 2 weeks before the court date for their bogus restitution claim, I received a call from one of my old contacts, a banker who'd once handled my parents' mortgage. Gary, he said cautiously, your parents have been trying to liquidate their assets fast. It's unusual. They're moving money to accounts in other names, Ryan's included. My pulse quickened. You're sure? Positive. And one more thing. You might want to check the records on that old property they own. It's not just in their name anymore. That night, I pulled up public property filings. He was right. My name had been quietly added as a co-owner again, without my consent. It was a trap, a setup to make it look like I was entangled in their finances again, right before court. But they'd made a mistake. Every forged signature had a digital trail, and I had the audit to prove it. I spent the next 3 days building what Lena jokingly called the kill file, a digital dossier containing every lie, every fake document, every forged transaction. Not just copies, original sources, cross-referenced with time-stamped backups and verification emails. On the morning of the hearing, I wore a black suit and calm expression. My parents sat across the room, flanked by their attorney. Ryan avoided my eyes. When the judge entered, their lawyer began dramatically. Your Honor, the defendants, Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, have suffered immense emotional and financial harm due to the reckless actions of their son. Clayton cut in. Your Honor, before we go further, I'd like to submit a counterclaim and accompanying evidence of document forgery, financial manipulation, and false testimony. The opposing counsel frowned. Excuse me. Clayton smiled thinly. You might want to take a look at Exhibit A. He handed the judge a thick binder. As the pages turned, the room fell silent. My mother's face went pale. My father's jaw twitched. Ryan shifted in his seat like a man who suddenly realized he was sitting on a landmine. The judge's voice was cold when she finally spoke. Mr. Hayes, Mrs. Hayes, care to explain why your signatures appear on falsified financial forms filed under your son's name? My parents said nothing. For once, no excuses, no bluster, just silence. Clayton stood. Your Honor, we also have evidence of ongoing tax fraud, misuse of charitable funds, and identity manipulation. We will be forwarding this to the district attorney's office following these proceedings. The judge nodded slowly. Noted. I didn't smile. Not once. Because this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about ending the cycle. When we walked out of the courthouse, Lena slipped her arm through mine. How do you feel? Tired, I admitted. But lighter. She smiled softly. It's over, isn't it? Almost, I said. Because as satisfying as that courtroom moment was, I knew the real revenge wasn't what happened in there. It was what would come next. The fallout. The unraveling. The slow collapse of everything they'd built on deception. And this time, I wasn't just going to watch it happen. I was going to make sure the world saw exactly who they really were. The fallout didn't explode overnight the way I'd imagined when I first started planning. It unfolded like a slow, unrelenting winter thaw, day by day, piece by piece, until everything they'd built on half-truths and forged signatures collapsed under its own weight. First came the DA. Clayton handed over the dossier we'd been building. The audit, the bank records, the forged documents, the shell company trails that led straight to Ryan's accounts and a handful of offshore transfers. The county prosecutor didn't waste time. Within weeks, indictments were filed: identity theft, tax fraud, embezzlement, and a list of other charges long enough to make my stomach flip when I read it in the sealed envelope Clayton placed on my desk. News spread. It's strange how quickly reputation crumbles when facts replace gossip. The article that had once painted me as the resilient entrepreneur now shifted context in people's minds. There were now public records, court filings, and hard numbers anyone could look up. Neighbors who had been whispering began to cross the street to say hello. Former clients called to apologize for letting rumors cloud judgment. Some asked to sign new contracts simply because they felt safer knowing the truth. For my parents, the consequences were both practical and public. Their names were pulled from the charity donor walls. The nonprofit treasurer who'd loved them for years testified in court about missing receipts, and the church that hosted their annual gala quietly declined to let them organize next year's event. Friends stopped answering calls. Invitations stopped coming. The quiet social death was worse for them than any legal penalty. It was a steady, painful reminder that the world they curated no longer accepted the version of them they'd sold. Legally, things moved faster than I expected. Ryan's consulting front collapsed under scrutiny. Creditors seized assets. His car was repossessed, and his partners in those phantom ventures filed suits. He eventually struck a plea deal, a year of probation, a suspended sentence, and mandatory restitution, conditions that left him humbled and broke. My parents fought as long as they could, issuing acerbic statements and accusing me in op-eds and angry letters. But the signed documents, the audit trails, the time-stamped emails, those things don't lie. Facing overwhelming evidence, they chose a civil settlement to avoid a criminal trial that would have publicly aired more of their misdeeds. The settlement included hefty fines, a court-ordered restitution plan, and a clause that prevented them from contacting Jacob or approaching our home. The judge's words when she signed it were simple: abuse of trust will not be tolerated. There were details that stung. Seeing my mother's face on the front page, older, stripped of the mask she used to wear, hurt in a way I didn't expect. There was a small part of me that imagined reconciliation, apologies that meant something. That didn't happen. What did happen was a quiet accountability that, for better or worse, kept my son safe. People who had once excused my parents as human and flawed now privately told me they'd seen patterns but never had the proof. A cousin I barely spoke to called and said, "I'm sorry. I should have believed you sooner." A handful of relatives accepted that what I'd done, cutting the money, exposing the fraud, had been messy but necessary. The media called again. This time the coverage wasn't about resilience. It was about systemic vulnerability, how the elderly can be exploited, how family ties can be weaponized, and how financial systems can be manipulated by those closest to us. I spoke about prevention, not revenge. I helped connect my lawyer's forensic analyst with a local elder rights group. Together, we set up a free clinic offering legal and financial audits for seniors in the county, pro bono protection for people who'd been taught to trust without question. My company paid the price in stress, but it recovered, stronger and cleaner for the storm. Lena's design business grew, and Jacob kept building rockets out of cardboard and imagination. He never saw courtrooms or settlements. He saw us as a home where bedtime stories were safe and where his drawings hung on the wall. That was the point all along. There were testy phone calls. One from Dad on a night he didn't know would be the last time I answered. He tried the old lines. "You owe us. Family must stick together. You've made us suffer." I told him what I told him the first night I hung up, that the difference between them and me was that I protected my family. I didn't use it as a cash flow. He didn't answer. Maybe he only heard himself. Maybe he heard the echo of a life he'd chosen. When the civil case closed, the court ordered the sale of a few properties to cover restitution. The house where they'd staged grand Christmas mornings for decades went to auction. I watched the listing like a man who had once been owned by other people's versions of him. Part of me wanted to buy it back out of spite. A larger part of me wanted nothing to do with that cycle. In the end, I let it go. The buyers were a small nonprofit that runs housing for people getting back on their feet. Seeing a place once used as a stage for manipulation become shelter felt oddly righteous without my having to declare it so. There was a quiet, human moment a month after the settlement. My mother's voice left a voicemail, short, trembling. She said nothing I needed to hear. She said she missed Jacob. She begged me to visit. I listened. I didn't call back. Lena and I talked late into the night, and we decided to maintain the boundaries that kept our family whole. Sometimes closure is silence, and some doors are locked not out of cruelty, but care. In the years that followed, the whispers dwindled. The scar tissue softened into a story I could tell without flinching. My firm expanded internationally. Lena's brand became known for integrity. Jacob won a science fair with a rocket that actually lifted. He was 9 then, and his grin was like an eclipse that swallowed every trace of the past. People asked me, often with a sort of morbid curiosity, whether revenge had felt sweet. I always answered the same way. It wasn't sweetness I sought. It was justice, clarity, and safety. Standing up for my son was never about punishment for its own sake. It was about building a life where the people who mattered to me couldn't be threatened by the lies of those who claimed to love them. The last email I ever sent to my parents' lawyer was short and formal. Confirmation of the settlement compliance and a final request that they not contact our family. I CC'd the nonprofit that would receive the proceeds from the sale of the house. File closed. On a quiet Sunday morning, Jacob and I walked the dog through our neighborhood. He had a new model rocket he'd built from a kit and a box of stickers. He stuck one on my jacket that said, in clumsy marker, "Hero." I laughed and pushed him gently on the swing at the park. "You're the best, Dad," he said, hair messed from the wind. "No," I corrected him, because the word felt too big for what we'd actually done. "You're the best kid." He rolled his eyes like kids do, then turned serious for a breath, the way children sometimes say truths too plain to ignore. "Dad, were Grandma and Grandpa mad at us forever?" I watched him, thinking of the long weeks of courtrooms and documents, the nights of fear, the slow climb back to a life where bedtime stories didn't end with tension. "They were," I said honestly. "But that's okay. We made our own family." He smiled, swung his legs, and then, because kids are merciful and merciless in the best ways, asked if we could build a bigger rocket next weekend. I looked at him and, for the first time in a long while, felt no urge to explain, no itch for vindication. The contest had been one where it mattered most, in the quiet, ordinary, everyday life of a boy who knows he belongs. That night, I sat on the porch with Lena and watched our house glow warm against the dark. I thought about the cost, the losses, the small kindnesses that had patched the hole my parents had tried to make. I thought about dignity, about how fragile it can be, and how fiercely you have to guard it. Before turning in, I checked my phone and sent one final message. No theatrics, no receipts, just a confirmation to the nonprofit and a note to Clayton. Then I locked it up and felt, for the first time in years, like a man who'd closed the door on something poisonous and walked away into a life he had built. The last thing I ever wanted to be was my father's son as he'd expected me to be. The last thing I became was a father my son could count on. That, in the end, was the revenge and the redemption both, quiet, complete, and entirely mine. I never thought my own family would turn on me. Not like this. Not on Christmas. But I guess that's what happens when people get used to taking you for granted. They start thinking you owe them, that everything you do for them is just the way things should be. And the second you stop, well, then you're the problem. My name is Noah. I'm 24 years old, and for the past few years, I've been the one holding my family together. Not that they ever acknowledged it. Growing up, we weren't rich, but we got by. My dad worked construction. My mom did part-time bookkeeping. We weren't drowning in money, but we weren't starving either. At least, not at first. Things changed when my dad hurt his back on the job a few years ago. He stopped working, said he was waiting on disability checks that never seemed to come. My mom picked up more hours, but even then, it wasn't enough. At first, I helped out because that's what family does. When I got my first job at 18, I gave them a little here and there, helped with groceries, covered the electric bill once in a while. But somehow, over the years, it became expected. The "can you help with this?" turned into "you need to pay this." And before I knew it, I was paying for almost everything: rent, utilities, food, even my younger sister's school expenses. And the worst part? They acted like it was nothing. Not once did my dad say thank you. My mom just treated it like my responsibility. And my older brother, who, by the way, was 27 and still lived at home, never chipped in a single cent. If anything, he made fun of me for being too responsible. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that once my dad got his disability or my mom got a better job, things would go back to normal. But that day never came. And somewhere along the way, I stopped believing it would. Still, I didn't expect what happened on Christmas night. We were all gathered around the table: me, my parents, my brother, and my 17-year-old sister, Lily. Dinner was the usual spread: turkey, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole. My mom had always been big on Christmas dinner, insisting we keep traditions alive no matter how tight money was. For the first half of the meal, everything seemed normal. My dad was drinking, no surprise there. My brother was glued to his phone, occasionally making a sarcastic comment whenever my mom tried to start a conversation. Lily was scrolling through social media. Just another holiday in the family. Then, somewhere between passing the stuffing and my dad pouring himself another glass of whiskey, the conversation shifted. "You know," my dad said, leaning back in his chair, "Noah's been living here rent-free for years now." I stopped mid-bite, my fork hovering over my plate. "What?" Mom nodded, as if this was something they'd discussed before. "We've been talking, honey. You're 24 now. It's time you moved out and started your own life." I stared at them. "You can't be serious." My brother snorted. "Dude, you're way too old to still be living at home." I set my fork down carefully. "I pay to live here." My dad waved a hand dismissively. "That's not the point. A man your age shouldn't be living with his parents." I laughed, a short, humorless sound. "I cover the rent, the electricity, the internet, groceries, half of Lily's school fees. And I'm the one freeloading." Mom sighed, shaking her head like I was being dramatic. "We're not saying you don't help, Noah. But it's time for you to be independent. Your father and I think it's for the best." "For who?" I asked, my voice sharp. She didn't answer. And that's when it really hit me. They hadn't even thought this through. They were so used to me paying for everything that it hadn't occurred to them what would happen when I left. For years, I had sacrificed for them, put my own wants, my own future, on hold so they could have a roof over their heads. And now, they were tossing me out like I was nothing. Like I was the problem. My stomach twisted. Not with sadness. Not even with anger. Just disbelief. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. "All right," I said. "If that's what you want." Mom's expression softened, like she thought I was finally seeing reason. "I know it's scary, sweetie, but this will be good for you. We can even help you look for a place." I almost laughed. Instead, I just nodded. "I'll start packing tomorrow." And for the first time that night, a flicker of uncertainty crossed her face. The next morning, I woke up early. Not because I wanted to, but because I barely slept. The conversation from last night kept playing in my head on an endless loop. The way my dad had leaned back in his chair like he was doing me a favor. The way my mom had spoken to me like I was a child who just didn't understand what was best for him. The way my brother had smirked, like this was all some big joke. But it wasn't a joke. They wanted me gone? Fine. I was gone. I grabbed a couple of duffel bags from my closet and started packing. Clothes first. The essentials. Then my work laptop, important documents, anything valuable I didn't want to leave behind. I didn't have much in the way of furniture. Most of it belonged to them anyway. I had always put off getting my own place because I thought they needed me. Turns out, they just needed my money. By noon, I was nearly done. I was shoving the last of my things into a bag when I heard a knock on my door. It was Lily. She hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "You're really leaving?" I zipped my bag shut. "That's what they wanted." She chewed her lip, looking uncomfortable. "Mom said you'd calm down." I let out a short laugh. She actually thinks this is me overreacting? Lily didn't answer. She just stood there, like she wasn't sure what to say. And for a brief second, I felt a pang of guilt. She was the only one I felt bad about leaving behind. She was still a kid, still stuck under their roof. But I couldn't stay for her. Look, I said, softening my tone. I'm not mad at you, okay? But I'm not staying where I'm not wanted. She nodded, but she looked away quickly, like she didn't want me to see whatever expression was on her face. And then, without another word, she turned and walked off. I sighed and grabbed my bags. Time to go. The living room was empty when I came downstairs. For a second, I thought maybe I could just slip out without another conversation. But as I reached the door, my mom walked in from the kitchen. Her eyes flicked to my bags, and she hesitated. You're really leaving now? I stared at her. You told me to. She frowned, like she didn't like hearing it put that way. Well, I thought you'd take a little more time to figure things out. No need. I already have a place I can stay. That wasn't entirely true. I had a few options, crashing with a friend, getting a short-term rental. I'd figure it out. What I wasn't going to do was stand here and let her guilt trip me into staying longer. My dad walked in next, scratching his stomach like this was just another lazy afternoon. So, you're really doing this, huh? I didn't even bother answering. I just reached for the doorknob. That's when my mom spoke again. Noah, before you go, we need to talk about the bills. I froze. Then I turned back slowly. What? Well, she said, as if this was the most reasonable thing in the world. I know you're moving out, but obviously we still need help with rent and utilities. We were thinking you could keep sending some money, at least for a little while. I just stared at her. I must have misheard. You're kidding. She shook her head. No, I'm serious. We can't afford everything on our own right now, and you've been helping for so long. It wouldn't be that different. You'd just be. I cut her off. You kicked me out. We asked you to move out, she corrected, like that made any difference. Dad sighed like I was the one being difficult. Come on, kid, don't be selfish. We took care of you for years. Now it's your turn to help us. I felt my hands curl into fists. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They had no problem throwing me out. No problem telling me to leave like I was some kind of parasite. But the second they realized that also meant losing my money, now they wanted me to stick around, just enough to keep paying their bills. Unbelievable. I took a deep breath. No, Mom blinked. No, I repeated. I'm not paying for anything anymore. You made it clear I'm not part of this household. So I'm done. Silence. Then Dad scoffed. Wow, that's how you repay us, huh? Mom looked genuinely offended. We're your family, Noah. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Funny, I said. You didn't seem to care about that last night. And with that, I turned back to the door, opened it, and stepped outside. Behind me, my mom started yelling my name. My dad said something under his breath. My brother, who had been in the kitchen this whole time, muttered, "Guess he's really doing it." But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I walked out the door, down the porch steps, and toward my car, gripping my bags a little tighter. I had no idea what came next. But for the first time in years, I knew one thing for sure. I was finally free. I drove away without looking back, my mind racing. I had no clear plan, but I knew one thing. I was never giving them another cent. The first night, I crashed at my friend Jason's place. He didn't ask many questions, just handed me a blanket and told me to make myself at home. I spent that night scrolling through rental listings, realizing for the first time that I could actually afford my own place now that I wasn't footing the bill for an entire household. Within a week, I signed the lease on a small but comfortable apartment. It wasn't anything fancy, just a one-bedroom with old cabinets and slightly creaky floors, but it was mine. No one barging into my room unannounced, no passive-aggressive comments about what I should or shouldn't be spending my money on. Just peace. I settled into a new routine, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living instead of just surviving. Meanwhile, my family was struggling, and I knew it. I didn't reach out, but word got around. Jason's mom still talked to mine occasionally, and he relayed the updates to me without me even asking. Apparently, my dad had assumed I would cave and keep sending them money. When the first month rolled around and I didn't, the reality hit them hard. Rent was suddenly hundreds more than they had budgeted for. The internet bill, the electric bill, the car payments, things I had been covering for years, were now their responsibility. And it wasn't going well. My mom picked up extra shifts at work. My dad started trying to sell some of his old junk, and my brother, who had always acted like my money didn't matter, suddenly had to start paying for his own gas instead of mooching off me. They were finally facing the consequences of their own choices, and I felt no guilt about it. As for me, I was thriving. My new place felt like freedom. I started decorating, picking out furniture I actually liked instead of making do with hand-me-downs. I could eat what I wanted, come and go as I pleased, and spend my paycheck on myself without feeling guilty. My stress levels dropped almost overnight. I didn't realize how tense I had been living with them until I was finally out. The best part? The overwhelming sense of relief every time I walked into my apartment, knowing I didn't have to answer to anyone. No more manipulation, no more guilt trips, no more financial drain. I had built a life of my own, and for the first time in a long time, I was happy. But then, a month later, my phone rang. It was my mom, and I had a feeling she wasn't calling just to check in. The phone rang late one afternoon as I was sitting on the couch, flipping through channels. I had just gotten home from work, and the comfort of my new apartment had become a routine, a new normal I was learning to appreciate more each day. I had barely noticed the call at first. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I had learned to stop screening my calls out of some misplaced loyalty. My curiosity got the better of me, so I picked up. Hello. There was a pause, followed by an all-too-familiar voice. Noah, it's Mom. I sighed, not even trying to hide the frustration that bubbled up. What is it, Mom? She immediately went into her usual concerned mother act, but this time it was more strained than usual. I just wanted to check in on you. I mean, it's been a few weeks, and I know you're doing fine, but we've been having some issues over here. I braced myself. I knew where this was going. We've been struggling a little bit with the bills, she continued. Things are tight. You know how much your dad is making, and I've had to pick up a few extra shifts, but it's still not enough. And, well, we just thought maybe you could help out a little, you know? It wouldn't have to be much. I leaned back in my chair, feeling the familiar heat rise in my chest. I already told you, Mom. I'm done paying the bills. You kicked me out. You said I wasn't welcome here anymore. You didn't need me, remember? There was a long silence on the other end, and I knew exactly what she was doing, waiting for me to crack, to give in, to feel guilty and start second-guessing myself. But I didn't. I know, Noah, I know. But it's different now. Your dad and I, we didn't mean it. We were upset, and you were upset, but now we're in this mess, and you're the only one who can help us get out of it. I let out a harsh laugh, shaking my head. I'm not going to help you. You made it clear that you didn't need me around, that I was a burden. You were fine with me paying your bills when I lived there, but now that I'm gone, you expect me to keep supporting you? No way. She huffed. You don't understand, Noah. This isn't about that. This is about family. You're still our son, and family helps each other out when times are tough. I sat up straighter, clenching my jaw. Yeah, family. Funny how that concept only seems to apply when you need something from me. When I needed help, I was invisible. Don't try to use that excuse now. Look, Noah, she said, her voice dropping into a pleading tone. We've tried everything. But without your contribution, we're going to lose the house. You can't expect us to just figure this out without you. It's your fault too. You have to help. My heart raced, and the anger started to flood in. My fault? Are you serious? I'm not responsible for your poor decisions. I'm not responsible for your finances, Mom. You and Dad made your choices, and now you have to deal with the consequences. I'm begging you, please. You can't just leave us like this. We need you. The words stung, not because I felt guilty, but because I realized how manipulative this all had become. I could feel the weight of their guilt, the desperate attempt to reel me back in. But I had drawn a line. They'd crossed it. There was no going back. I stayed silent for a moment. Then, slowly, I spoke. I can't help you. I won't. You wanted me gone, and now I'm gone. I'm sorry you're struggling, but that's not my problem. There was another long silence. I could hear the faint sound of her breathing, and then she hung up without saying another word. I sat there for a long time afterward, feeling a mixture of relief and guilt. I didn't want to feel guilty, but I couldn't help it. After everything that had happened, I knew I had made the right choice, but I still hated seeing them struggle. But I didn't give them any more of my time. I didn't call. I didn't go to visit. And I certainly didn't send any money. A few days later, I got a text from my dad. It was short. Come home, Noah. We need to talk. I ignored it. That was when they started showing up. It was a Saturday when they showed up at my apartment, my mom and dad, standing at my front door like they had every right to be there. My heart dropped when I saw them through the peephole. They hadn't called in advance, hadn't texted or asked for a meeting. They just showed up. I opened the door slowly, trying to maintain composure. "What are you doing here?" I asked, trying to sound neutral, even though the anger was bubbling just beneath the surface. "We need to talk," my dad said, voice low and demanding. He was always the more stubborn one, the one who couldn't accept that things weren't going his way. "I told you, I don't want to talk to you." I stood firm in the doorway, blocking them from entering. "You made it clear where I stand. I'm not going to keep bailing you out just because you didn't plan for the consequences of your actions." My mom, standing behind my dad, finally spoke up. "Noah, this is ridiculous. We're family. You can't just leave us to fend for ourselves." "And why not?" I snapped. "You didn't care about me when I was paying for everything, so why should I care about you now?" "Because you owe us." My dad's voice rose, more desperate now. "We gave you everything. You didn't have to worry about bills. We let you live under our roof for all those years. And now you want to just walk away from all of it? You can't do that. You have to help us. You're not getting a penny from me." I stood my ground, not even moving an inch. They stood there, glaring at me for a long moment. The tension between us was palpable, a thick, suffocating wall of anger and hurt. And then, my dad did something I hadn't expected. He stepped forward and pushed past me. "Get out of the way, Noah." I didn't even try to stop him. The moment he crossed the threshold, I realized just how much he had assumed that he was still in control. He marched through my apartment like it was his own, looking around at everything with an air of entitlement. "This place is a dump," he muttered under his breath. "Get out of my apartment," I said through gritted teeth. But he didn't leave. Instead, he turned around, crossing his arms. "You need to start acting like a responsible adult, Noah. You need to help us. You owe us." I felt my anger building up. "I don't owe you anything. I'm done with this." My mom finally stepped forward, trying to soften the situation. "Please, Noah. We're not asking for much. Just a little help with the bills, and we'll be fine." I looked at her, shaking my head in disbelief. "You don't get it, do you? I'm not your backup plan. I'm not here to fix everything for you. I'm done." They stood there for a moment, silent and stunned, as if they had never expected me to push back like this. The silence stretched out, and then I said the words that would make everything final. "I don't want to see you again." And with that, I shut the door in their faces. It's been a few months since that day. Things have been surprisingly peaceful on my end. I've settled into a routine, work, my own space, my own bills. Honestly, I'm doing better than I ever thought I would. I feel free from the constant pressure I used to live under. As for my parents, things aren't going as smoothly for them. The bills are piling up, and they've had to make some serious sacrifices. They've started reaching out to other relatives for help, but I don't know how much longer they can keep up the act that everything's fine. I've heard through the grapevine that my dad's been trying to get a second job, but I'm not sure if it's going to be enough. I'll admit, part of me feels bad seeing them struggle, but another part of me knows that this is the consequence of their own actions. They chose to kick me out, and now they're dealing with the fallout. I'm still sticking to my decision. No more handouts, no more taking care of their responsibilities. But I want to hear your thoughts. Did I do the right thing? Should I have helped them out just a little, even after all they put me through? Or did I draw the line in the right place? I'm curious to hear what you all think. I was halfway through my chicken parm when Dad leaned across the table with a smug little grin and asked, "So, Hunter, are you enjoying the $3,000? At first, I thought he was joking, like one of his weird dad jokes that never quite land. But then I looked up and saw the way his eyes were squinting at me, the way Mom froze with her fork in midair, and the way my sister was suddenly way too interested in her napkin. That's when I realized this wasn't a joke. And whatever $3,000 he was talking about, I hadn't seen a dime. My name's Hunter, I'm 26, and I've always thought my family was, well, functional enough. Not perfect, what family is? But growing up, I figured we were doing okay. 2 parents, 1 younger sister. Her name's Kennedy. She's 23 now, and a golden retriever named Milo who honestly got more birthday cards than I ever did. We weren't rich, but my parents were smart with money. Dad's in logistics, Mom's an accountant, and they always preached the value of saving, budgeting, and not living beyond your means. Which made what I later found out feel like getting slapped with a brick wrapped in a budget spreadsheet. The thing is, I've always been the low-maintenance kid. I moved out at 20, worked part-time through college, lived in a dumpy little apartment with 3 roommates and mold in the shower. Never asked for money, never expected a car on my birthday, never once demanded help when I was eating canned soup 5 nights a week. Meanwhile, Kennedy was different. Think manicures at 16, designer bags at 18, a MacBook for college essays, even though she was mostly using it to stream Love Island. And two gap years to find herself in Europe while I was busting my back hauling furniture for tuition money. Still, I figured that's just how it is with younger siblings sometimes. Parents get softer the second time around, right? And besides, it wasn't like I was keeping score. At least, not until that dinner last month. The one that snapped the blinders off and made me realize just how deep this hole went. It was supposed to be a simple family dinner. Mom had invited me out to celebrate my new promotion. I'd just gotten bumped up to project manager at the small tech company I work for, and they wanted to take me somewhere nice. We went to this Italian place I loved as a kid, one of those family-run joints with red checkered tablecloths and pictures of Venice on the walls. We were mid-meal when Dad dropped the bombshell question about the $3,000. What money? I said, half laughing. That's when Dad's smile vanished like someone hit a switch. His brow creased, and he looked at Mom like she'd just spilled wine on the rug. Wait, you didn't tell him? Mom didn't answer. She just set her fork down, slowly, like she was afraid any sudden movement might make the situation worse. What money? I repeated, my voice sharper this time. Dad looked back at me. Your mom's been sending you money each month since last year. $250 a month. I thought it was to help with your student loans or rent or something. She told me you were tight on cash. My stomach dropped. Not in that dramatic movie way, but like an elevator just clipped its cables and left me hanging somewhere between fury and disbelief. I haven't gotten a single cent, I said slowly. Not one. Dad blinked. Are you serious? Mom finally spoke. Hunter, I didn't think it mattered. Didn't think it mattered? I asked. You told Dad you were sending me money. Why would you lie about that? And that's when Kennedy piped up. Okay, can we not make this a whole thing right now? This pasta is literally getting cold. That was my first real clue. The casual way she said it. Like she knew. Like she wanted to move past it because the spotlight was turning in her direction. My brain started connecting dots I didn't even know were on the board. I turned to Mom, suddenly very still. Where's the money been going? She hesitated. Just for a second, but it was enough. Dad was already ahead of me. Wait, he said, his voice low. Tell me you haven't been giving it to. Kennedy needed help. Mom interrupted. She was going through a rough time. It was just supposed to be temporary, but then her phone broke, and she had that skin treatment thing, and the rent on her new place in Midtown was more than we expected. I stared at her. So, for over a year, you've been giving Kennedy money you told Dad was for me? Silence. I turned to Kennedy. What exactly have you been spending my money on? She rolled her eyes. Oh, please. It's not your money. It came from Mom. And it's not like you needed it. You've got a job and everything. I'm still trying to figure things out. And figuring things out requires what? Weekly spa treatments and a new iPhone. I snapped. Kennedy crossed her arms. You don't know what it's like to have real stress. Try dealing with a breakup, moving apartments, job interviews, and trying to keep your mental health in check, all without proper skincare. I wanted to laugh. I really did. But the kind of laugh that ends with someone flipping a table. Dad was just staring at Mom. You lied to me, he said quietly. For over a year. It wasn't a lie, she said defensively. It was reallocating. Reallocating. That word stuck in my head for days afterward. Like I was some line item on her personal budget sheet, easily deleted and moved around without a second thought. It wasn't even about the money anymore, not really. It was about the deception. About the fact that they could all sit there, eating breadsticks and sipping wine, while I was completely in the dark. After dinner, I didn't go home. I drove around for an hour, then crashed at my friend Noah's place. He didn't ask questions, just handed me a beer and let me sit with the silence. But I couldn't let it go. The next morning, I went digging. Old texts, bank statements, gift receipts. I remembered Mom once asked for my account number, just in case, and I'd sent it to her without a second thought. I pulled up my old messages and there it was. She had it. She'd just never used it. Instead, I found out she'd been transferring the money to an account ending in 5204. Kennedy's account. I recognized the last 4 digits from when we were kids, and Mom helped us open teen checking accounts at the same bank. Kennedy had never changed hers. That's when the full weight of it hit me. They'd been pretending to help me, to celebrate me, while funneling money to the one person who'd never had to lift a finger in her life. All while telling Dad I was getting help I never asked for. I wish I could say that was the worst of it. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Because the deeper I looked, the more I found. And by the end of the week, I wasn't just angry. I was ready to get even. I didn't confront them right away. I needed time, not just to process what had happened, but to figure out how long this had been going on and how deep it really went. I don't mean to sound dramatic, but once someone close to you lies like that, it changes how you see everything. Every memory gets reevaluated. Every birthday, every holiday, every offhand comment that used to feel like nothing suddenly feels loaded. At first, I told myself maybe it was just the $3,000 and nothing more. Maybe it was one of those messed up, mom wants to protect the baby of the family things. But that denial didn't last long. Because once I started pulling threads, the whole sweater unraveled. I started with Venmo. Kennedy's account was public. Not everything showed up, but enough did. Payment notes like Monty Petty treat yourself and rent thanks, an emergency hair fix were scattered through the past year. All of them from Mom. The earliest one was nearly 16 months ago. 16 months. That's $250 a month, which means, at least, $4,000. And that didn't even account for the bigger stuff. I found a tagged post on Kennedy's Instagram from about 5 months back. She was smiling outside a boutique hotel in Miami with the caption, "Needed this mini reset after such a stressful week. #selfcare queen," a friend commented. "Love the new Prada bag." And Kennedy actually replied, "Mama's treat. She gets me." Prada Miami. Stressful week. I felt like a fool. A full-blown clown. Here I was turning down outings with friends, delaying a car repair because my tire tread was dangerously low, and cutting back on groceries so I could start building a real emergency fund. And meanwhile, Kennedy was out here getting reimbursed by Mom for emotional turbulence and a bad breakup. I remembered back to last Thanksgiving, how Kennedy showed up late in some trendy beige sweater with a new iPhone and fake lashes so long they looked like windshield wipers. I joked, "Wow, someone's doing well," and she just smirked and said, "Gotta treat yourself." Mom chimed in back then, too, laughing along with her. "She's just young and fabulous. You were the same way, Hunter." Except I wasn't. I had a job at Jamba Juice at her age and shared a one-bedroom with a guy who never did the dishes. I didn't even own a working laptop until I was 22. I'd never once flown to Miami to reset. But it wasn't just the money, it was the attitude. Kennedy had always acted like she was owed the world, like every inconvenience was a personal attack. When her car got towed 2 years ago for parking in a loading zone, she cried for 2 days and called Mom to bail her out. When she lost her first internship, which she barely showed up to, she posted a 5-paragraph notes app story on Instagram about how capitalism was crushing her spirit and how she wasn't made to be boxed into a 9 to 5 system. And Mom defended her. Every single time. She's sensitive. She's still figuring it out. "You're the strong one. Hunter, you've always been independent." As if that made it okay to leave me out of everything. As if my silence gave her permission. I spent that whole week diving into my memories, re-examining them under this new, harsh light. And one moment kept coming back, my 25th birthday. It was just last year. I remember because it was the first one after I'd moved into my own one-bedroom. I was so proud of that place. Small, sure, but clean and all mine. I'd invited my parents and Kennedy over for a quiet dinner. I cooked, decorated, even bought a cake. Kennedy showed up nearly an hour late, and when she walked in, she barely glanced around. "Cute," she said, eyeing the place like it was a hotel lobby. She didn't plan to stay in long. Then she sat on my couch and scrolled through her phone the entire time. I remember Mom hugging me that night and saying, "We didn't get you anything big this year. Money's tight with your sister's situation, but we're so proud of you." That phrase hit different now. Money's tight. Yeah, I'll bet. Because apparently, Kennedy had just started her skincare subscription box and weekly acupuncture sessions. And then, just to really twist the knife, I remembered something Dad told me earlier this year. We were having lunch alone, and he said, "Your mom worries sometimes that you feel left out with all the attention Kennedy gets. But just so you know, we see you. Even if we don't always say it." I'd brushed it off. It's fine. She's the loud one. Now I wasn't sure if that was true, or if I'd just learned how to make myself small enough to avoid being a burden. I didn't talk to any of them for a while after the dinner. ignored texts, declined a Sunday family lunch. I didn't trust myself to be in the same room without saying something I'd regret, or worse, something they still wouldn't take seriously. But of course, silence only made them louder. A week later, Mom called. I let it ring. Then she texted, Hi honey. I know you're upset. Please don't let this come between us. It was never about favoritism. Kennedy was just going through a lot, and I didn't want to burden you. Me. You told Dad you were sending me money. That's not just protecting Kennedy. That's lying. To both of us. I just thought it would be easier that way. You were doing fine. Me. So you decided I didn't deserve help. No. Of course not. You're just more stable. Kennedy needs more from us right now. That sentence broke me. Kennedy needs more from us. As if my needs didn't matter because I wasn't falling apart. As if being responsible meant forfeiting any claim to support or fairness. I didn't want handouts, I never had. But I did want honesty. And at the very least, respect. Then Kennedy messaged me. Kennedy, Mom said you're being really dramatic about the whole money thing. I didn't reply. A minute later. Kennedy, I didn't ask her to lie. That's on her. And to be honest, it's not like I'm rich either. You think $250 a month covers a lifestyle? LOL, no. Then she sent a third one, probably thinking it would help. Kennedy, look, if it really means that much to you, I'll stop taking the money. That was the moment I realized she didn't feel guilty. She felt annoyed, like I was inconveniencing her with my reaction. I didn't reply. Later that week, Mom tried inviting me to a family check-in dinner. I declined, told her I was busy. Truth was, I wasn't ready to sit across from them and pretend everything was okay just because she wanted to sweep it under the rug. But life has a way of pulling people back together whether they like it or not. 2 weeks later, Dad's birthday came up. He wanted a barbecue at home. I debated skipping it, seriously debated it, but in the end, I went. Not for Mom or Kennedy, but for him. Because despite everything, he'd always tried to stay neutral. Maybe too neutral, but he didn't deserve the fallout. So I showed up. I brought drinks, said hi, helped with the grill, tried to act normal. It was going fine until Kennedy strolled in wearing a new designer jacket. One of those cropped suede ones that looks like it costs a car payment. Dad noticed immediately. Nice coat, he said. Did you finally land that job you were interviewing for? She blinked. What? Oh, no, that didn't work out. But I needed a pick-me-up. I caught Mom's eyes darting to me. Guilt flashed across her face. Just for a second. Dad looked confused. Didn't you say you were cutting back? Kennedy shrugged. Mom said it was fine. Boom. There it was. In front of everyone. Dad's brow furrowed. Find a what? Kennedy froze. Mom cleared her throat. It was just a little gift. Dad set down his plate. After we agreed there wouldn't be any more extra spending, the air got tight. Even Milo stopped chewing his squeaky toy. Kennedy looked defensive. It's not like I'm some moocher. I'm trying. It's just taking longer for me, okay? Dad turned to Mom. You said you stopped the payments. Mom glanced at me, then back at him. I might have helped her with a few things. Dad's voice went flat. Define a few. That's when I stood up. $4, $500, I said. Everyone looked at me. That's how much she's gotten at minimum. Since you thought I was the one getting the support. Mom looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. Kennedy scoffed. Oh my God, she said. Are you seriously tracking my life like some jealous little gremlin? I didn't flinch. No. I'm just tired of being the invisible one while you get praised for breathing. Dad's jaw tightened. He looked back at Mom. Is that true? Mom didn't answer. And that silence was louder than anything she could have said. But what none of them knew, what I'd been quietly preparing in the background, was that I wasn't just planning to confront them. I was planning something much bigger. Something they wouldn't see coming. After that birthday barbecue, the mood in the family shifted, but not in the way I'd hoped. You'd think exposing 16 months of lies would make people pause and reflect, maybe apologize, maybe even make things right. But instead, it was like I'd kicked a beehive. Mom started treating me like I was the problem. Kennedy became colder than ever. And Dad, he was stuck in the middle, trying to keep the peace while clearly nursing a growing resentment of his own. For a while, I kept my distance. No Sunday dinners, no group texts. I stayed polite but distant, like a coworker at a party you didn't want to be invited to. I threw myself into work, long hours, overtime, anything to keep my mind busy. But late at night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About all the times I'd bent over backward to be self-reliant. only to find out they saw that as a reason to exclude me. That being strong meant being ignored. That being responsible meant being used. Then, about 3 weeks later, Mom called. Again. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. Her voice was sweet. Too sweet. "Hi, honey," she said. "I was wondering if you could come by this weekend. We're organizing a little brunch." "I'm good," I said, keeping my tone flat. "It's not a big thing. Just some family and a few of Kennedy's friends. She's going through a rough patch, and I thought it might lift her spirits." I nearly laughed. "A rough patch? Again? She's still getting a little help from you?" I asked. Mom sighed, clearly annoyed I wouldn't just drop it. "Hunter, can we not do this every time we talk? It's just brunch." And that's when it hit me. It wasn't just brunch. It was always something. A birthday, a barbecue, a brunch, a crisis, a favor. And every single time, it was centered around her. And somehow, I was always expected to show up, play nice, and shove my feelings down for the sake of family. Still, a part of me was curious. I agreed to come, but only to observe. I told myself I wouldn't get drawn into anything. Just show up, smile, leave early. But that day, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. When I arrived, the house was already full. Laughter floated from the kitchen, and there were mimosas on the counter, little fruit platters, even a mini congrats banner strung across the dining room wall. At first, I thought it was for someone's birthday or maybe a friend's baby shower. Then I saw the gift bags. 5 of them, all neatly arranged with gold tissue paper and little white tags that read, "Thank you for helping Kennedy start her next chapter." My stomach turned. I walked over and picked up one of the cards, reading it again to be sure I wasn't misinterpreting it. Then I turned around and asked the room, "Start what chapter?" That's when Mom walked in. Carrying a tray of quiche like this was some kind of Hallmark movie. "Oh," she said. "You're early." "I'm on time," I said. "What's this about Kennedy's next chapter?" She hesitated. It was brief, but I caught it. That little flicker of panic before the mask came back on. "Well, we were going to wait to tell you until after brunch. But she's moving to LA. I blinked. LA? Since when? A couple weeks ago. She landed an opportunity out there. A modeling rep. One of her friends connected her. And you didn't think to mention this before? We didn't want to overwhelm you," she said, already defensive. "It's been a delicate process." I looked around again, at the decorations, the catered food, the 5 gift bags. This wasn't last minute. This had been planned for weeks. "So let me get this straight," I said slowly. "You've been funneling money to Kennedy for over a year. Lied to Dad about it. Lied to me. Then, when you finally said you'd stop, you kept doing it. And now, after all that, you're sending her off to LA with a literal party, and I'm just supposed to smile and eat mini quiche like everything's fine?" She set the tray down, her voice tight. "Hunter, it's not like that. You always twist things." Before I could respond, Kennedy walked in wearing oversized sunglasses, inside, and holding a champagne flute. "Oh my God," she said, seeing me. "Is this seriously going to be another one of your meltdowns? I'm just finding it hard to believe this." I gestured around the room. "Is what you consider fair treatment?" She shrugged. "Sorry you're not the main character, Hunter." I nearly walked out right then. But before I could, Dad came around the corner. He looked surprised to see me. "Didn't think you'd show." "Neither did I said, then turned to him. "Did you know about LA?" He hesitated, which told me everything. "Your mom told me last week. And you didn't think I should know?" "It wasn't my call." "Of course it wasn't. It never was." I left the brunch early. Didn't eat. Didn't say goodbye. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. And that's when I decided I was done being passive. Done letting them dictate how I was allowed to feel. Done letting my own family treat me like an afterthought. I started looking into Kennedy's so-called opportunity. The modeling agency she mentioned? It wasn't even an agency. It was a startup talent collective run out of a 2-room co-working space in downtown LA. Their website was glitchy, their Instagram had less than 500 followers, and their most recent model post was of a guy doing squats on a rooftop in sandals. In other words, a scam. Or at best, a desperate gamble. I wasn't shocked. Kennedy had a talent for falling into things that sounded glamorous, but never went anywhere. But here's where things get worse. Way worse. 3 days after the brunch, I got a text from Dad. Just 3 words. "We need to talk." I called him. He sounded off. "Hunt, can you come over tonight?" "Why?" He paused. I need to show you something. It's about the house. That's when my stomach dropped. When I got there, he was in his office, door closed, blinds drawn. He looked exhausted. He handed me a folder. It was a copy of a financial transfer. $15,000. From their joint account. To Kennedy. Labeled, Loan, Housing Startup. I looked up at him. What is this? She told your mother she needed a safety cushion to secure a place out west. A housing deposit for when she moved. Said the agency had limited openings and she had to act fast. I already knew where this was going. And Mom just gave it to her. He nodded. Without telling me. I only found out yesterday when I checked the account for the property tax payment. $15,000, I whispered. She pulled it from the emergency fund. You remember that account we set up after Grandpa passed? I nodded slowly. The one he left for emergencies. Car repairs. Medical. Dad's jaw was clenched. Gone. I sat back, stunned. Does Kennedy even know that's where it came from? I doubt it. And if she does, she doesn't care. I couldn't believe it. Not just the amount, but the level of betrayal. Mom had dipped into an inheritance meant to keep the family stable during hard times, to bankroll a pipe dream. And she didn't even tell her husband. She didn't tell me. She just acted. I asked the obvious. Can you reverse it? Or freeze the account? Dad shook his head. Already processed. She transferred it to her personal savings. Then withdrew most of it. Cash. Cash. Meaning it was gone. And that's when I realized something that made my blood run cold. She's not planning to come back. Dad looked at me, confused. What? She's burning the bridge. Taking the money and running. And Mom's letting her. We sat in silence. Then Dad said something that changed everything. I think your mom put her name on the deed. I blinked. What? I'm not sure. She's been cagey about the paperwork lately. Said she needed to update a few things with the lawyer. But I overheard her on the phone with Kennedy last week. Something about ensuring future security if anything happened to her or me. And that was it. That was the moment. The moment I knew Mom wasn't just playing favorites. She was setting Kennedy up to inherit everything. The house. The emergency fund. The insurance. All of it. And me? I'd be lucky if they remembered to forward the Christmas cards. I didn't sleep that night. My mind raced through every conversation, every small betrayal I'd overlooked for the sake of peace. But this wasn't just about being left out anymore. This was theft, manipulation, erasure, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Not this time. I didn't go home that night. After Dad dropped the bomb about the deed, I just drove. No destination. Just road and headlights and a tight, sour feeling in my chest that wouldn't go away. I must have passed the same gas station 4 times without realizing it. I wasn't crying. Nothing that clean or cathartic. I just felt empty. Like the inside of me had been scraped out and filled with wet concrete. Heavy. Cold. Final. $15,000 from Grandpa's emergency fund. A secret deed change. A sister packing her bags for Los Angeles with designer luggage and fake lashes while I was still driving a 12-year-old Corolla with a cracked taillight. And somehow, I was still the villain in their eyes, for asking questions, for noticing. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex at 3 in the morning, my head was pounding. I sat in the car with the engine off and stared at the wall of my building, wondering if I should just sleep in the driver's seat, go inside and face the silence, or stay in the dark a little longer. I went inside eventually, but I didn't sleep. Over the next few days, everything in my life started to fray. I messed up a client report at work. Forgot a team Zoom meeting. Ate cereal for dinner 4 nights in a row. My rent notice came in, and I stared at it like it was written in another language. Not because I couldn't afford it. Thankfully I could. But because my brain was just done. Checked out. Going through the motions. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard those words again. I think your mom put her name on the deed. It echoed over and over. Because that wasn't just some line in a conversation. That was my family quietly deciding that I didn't matter. That Kennedy, who had never held a steady job, who used phrases like energy blockage to justify quitting internships, who had a skincare shelf worth more than my entire laptop setup, was more deserving of protection, security, legacy, everything. And I couldn't shake the thought. What if something happened to Dad? Would I even be allowed in the house? Would Kennedy show up in heels and sunglasses and declare it her property now, with Mom standing behind her nodding like it was fair? I started checking legal forms at night. Googling, can a parent remove a child from a deed without telling them? And how to contest estate fraud. The answers weren't great. It all depended on whether anything had been officially changed, and since I wasn't on the deed in the first place, technically it wasn't mine to be removed from. But emotionally, spiritually, that house was mine. It was the only place I'd ever known growing up. I could still see the pencil marks on the pantry door measuring our heights every birthday. The dent in the banister where Kennedy tripped in her princess heels and blamed it on me. The ceiling crack in my childhood bedroom shaped like a crooked lightning bolt. That house held my memories, my ghosts, my childhood, and they were giving it to her. I confronted Mom a few days later. Not angrily, not in some explosive shouting match. Just quiet, controlled, cold. I called her while she was at work. Left a message asking to meet at a local coffee shop. Neutral ground. Somewhere public. Somewhere I could keep my composure. When she walked in, she smiled like nothing was wrong. "Hi, sweetheart." I didn't smile back. We sat. She ordered a tea. I didn't order anything. "Is this about the other night?" she asked. "No," I said. "This is about the deed." Her face froze. "I know," I said. "Dad told me." There was a long silence. The kind that stretches so tight you expect it to snap. Then, she sighed. "I didn't want to tell you until it was finalized. I knew you'd overreact." "I wouldn't have overreacted," I said. "I would have reacted. Like a person whose entire sense of family just imploded." She rolled her eyes, rolled her eyes. "Don't be dramatic." "Dramatic?" I asked louder now. "You lied to Dad. You lied to me. You gave Kennedy 15 grand and changed the deed without even a conversation. That's not drama. That's betrayal. She needs more support than you," Mom said, voice clipped. "She always has. You know that." I stared at her. "You're not even pretending anymore, are you?" "She's moving across the country," she snapped. "She needs a safety net. You're already fine. You've always been fine." I wanted to scream. Instead, I asked, "What happens if Dad passes first? Does Kennedy inherit the house?" Mom hesitated. "That's not the plan. Answer the question." A pause. "Yes," she said. "Technically." That was the final crack in the dam. Everything inside me went still. "Then we're done," I said. She blinked. "Excuse me." "I'm done, Mom. With the pretending. With the manipulation. With being your backup plan." "You're being cruel," she said quietly. "We're family." "No," I said, standing. "We were." I left without looking back. Dad tried calling that night. I didn't answer. I didn't have the energy to play diplomat anymore. Over the next few weeks, I went dark. Not in an act of revenge, at least not yet, but in an act of self-preservation. I stopped answering family group chats. I skipped Kennedy's going-away dinner. I deleted Instagram to avoid seeing her California Here I Come palm tree posts. I started therapy too. Figured if I was going to get through this, I need someone to talk to who didn't think I was just being too sensitive. And through it all, I planned. Not for revenge. Not yet. But for distance. I started looking for new apartments. Out of state. Clean slate. I'd always dreamed of moving to Seattle or Denver, and now I had nothing tying me here except memories and pain. I made a spreadsheet of cities, jobs, costs of living. I updated my resume. I contacted a few old friends who'd moved away and asked what life was like outside the orbit of family guilt. I started writing everything down. Not just legal options or relocation plans, but the history, the little things. I compiled screenshots, bank statements, text conversations. Not because I planned to go nuclear, but because part of me didn't trust them not to twist the story someday. To make me the villain. The ungrateful son. The bitter brother. One night, I got a call from Kennedy. I stared at the screen for a full minute before answering. "Hey," she said. "Guess who's beachside?" I didn't respond. "Okay, rude," she laughed. "I just wanted to say bye. I'm flying out tomorrow." "Congrats," I said flatly. She paused. "You're seriously not going to wish me luck? I think you've already got enough of that." Another pause. "Look," she said, her tone shifting. "I know you're mad, but you've always been the stable one. You don't need help." "I do." "Why?" I asked. "What makes you so special?" She laughed again, nervous, high-pitched. "I'm not special, Hunter. I'm different." "Different means needy now?" "No," she said. "Different means I don't fit in the way you do. Mom understands that. You never did." There it was. The delusion. The entitlement packaged in poetry. "Well," I said, "good luck finding someone in LA who'll fund your fantasy." "You're cruel," she said, echoing Mom's words. I didn't care. She hung up first. And for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. Not happiness, not closure, but control. I wasn't the invisible one anymore. I was the one walking away. I still had no idea how far this rabbit hole went, or what Mom might have signed or promised or stolen, but I knew one thing for sure. They hadn't broken me. Not yet. And I wasn't done. I moved 3 months after Kennedy left for LA. It wasn't dramatic. No fiery farewell or final confrontation. I didn't slam doors or make a speech. I just quietly packed my things into cardboard boxes, donated half my furniture, and drove north with the windows down and a Spotify playlist that started with Hosier and ended with silence. I left my apartment keys in the drop box and didn't tell anyone, not even Dad, where I was going. I ended up in Portland. Not forever, but far enough. A city with rain, trees, and no ghosts. I rented a 1-bedroom in a converted Craftsman with creaky floors and a landlord who talked like he'd been a roadie for Fleetwood Mac. The place had charm. And more importantly, it was mine. I didn't tell anyone my new address. I didn't send postcards. I didn't even update the family group chat, which, hilariously, still existed, even though it had gone quiet since Kennedy's move. At first, I felt like I was just running, escaping the weight of years spent as the strong one, the independent one, the he's fine, don't worry about him sibling. But over time, I realized I wasn't just escaping, I was reclaiming. Everything. My time. My peace. My voice. Work came with me. The tech company I'd been with let me go remote, and with the move came a surprising opportunity. I'd been casually developing a project management tool with one of my coworkers. A side hustle, really. We pitched it to a few startups in the area, and before I knew it, we had our first small client. Then another. Then 2 more. Within 6 months, we'd spun it into a full LLC and split the stake 50/50ths. It wasn't glamorous. No venture capital, no hoodies with logos. Just late nights, clean code, and meetings where no one talked down to me. For the first time, I was the one calling the shots. I was the one steering the ship. And my bank account? It started to reflect that. By the end of the year, I was making nearly twice what I made at my old job. But that wasn't even the best part. The best part was how small everything back home started to feel. I'd open Instagram sometimes. Yeah, I reinstalled it and scroll past Kennedy's beach selfies and carefully posed matcha shots. Her captions always looked like Pinterest had a breakdown. Sunset skin, soul reset, #healing era, manifesting kindness and direct deposit. When your aura is too strong for basic vibes. I didn't even feel angry anymore. Just tired. Watching her try to rebrand herself every week felt like watching someone put glitter on a cracked mirror. And Mom, she'd gone strangely quiet. No texts, no calls, not even a birthday message when I turned 27. It stung, but only for a moment. Because slowly, my life began to fill with people who saw me. Not the version of me that my family had constructed, some stoic, unfeeling support beam, but me. The guy who loved board games and late-night ramen. The guy who geeked out over urban planning podcasts. The guy who didn't have to perform strength just to be accepted. I joined a climbing gym. Made a few friends through work and a volunteer coding mentorship program. Started dating someone who actually asked about my day and listened when I answered. Her name was Lila. Soft-spoken, sharp-eyed, and a therapist by trade. The first time I told her about my family, I expected the usual head tilt and polite "that's rough." Instead, she asked me one question. Why did you keep showing up for them, even after they kept choosing her? I didn't know the answer then, but I kept thinking about it. Because she was right. For years, I'd let myself believe that being the reliable one meant absorbing everyone else's chaos. That if I was just patient enough, responsible enough, quiet enough, I'd earn my spot. Be seen. Be chosen. But that's not how it works. You don't earn love by disappearing. You earn it by showing up for yourself. A year passed. Then one day, out of nowhere, I got a letter. Not a text. Not an email. An actual letter, postmarked from LA. Inside was a short, handwritten note in Kennedy's loopy cursive. Hey, things are weird here. The agency folded. I'm working part-time at a juice bar. Thinking of coming back for a bit. Mom says you're still not talking to anyone. Just wanted to say hi. Hope you're okay. Okay. I stared at it for a while. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just another gentle nudge, like I was a vending machine and she was hoping I still had something left to dispense. I didn't reply. 2 months later, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring. Then I checked the voicemail. It was Dad. His voice was rough. Older. Hey, Hunter. I know you're busy. Just wanted to let you know the house is going up for sale. Your mom's moving into a condo. Said it's too much to manage on her own. Anyway, hope you're well. I miss you, kid. It should have felt like a victory. I'd known they couldn't sustain that life forever, that the money would run out, that reality would catch up. But instead, it just felt hollow. The house was never the problem. It was the people inside it. Lila and I went out to dinner that night. I told her about the voicemail. She reached across the table, squeezed my hand, and said, "You don't owe them your peace." And she was right. But something in me still wanted closure. Not for them, for me. So I started writing. Not a blog. Not a public essay. Just a letter. To Mom. I spent 3 weeks working on it. Every paragraph rewritten. Every sentence combed through. I didn't hold back, but I didn't rant either. I told her everything. The lies. The favoritism. The betrayal. The way it made me feel. Not just angry, but small. Forgotten. Like my love was only useful if it was quiet. I ended it with this. I'm not reaching out to repair things. I'm reaching out to say I see you now. I see what you chose. And I see myself more clearly because of it. I'm not the background character in Kennedy's story. I'm not your plan B. I'm the author of my own life now. And in this chapter, I'm choosing peace. Whether you're in it or not. I mailed it. No return address. Did she ever read it? I don't know. Did it change anything? Probably not. But it changed me. That was the month everything started to bloom. Lila and I moved in together. Our app landed a contract with a regional healthcare group. I took a trip to Japan, my first real vacation in years. I hiked in the mountains, ate ramen in an alley at midnight, watched the sunrise from a train window, and cried without knowing exactly why. Back home, I bought a condo. It wasn't big, but it was sunny, quiet, the kind of place where you can hear your own thoughts and still want to be there with them. And one day, while organizing old boxes, I found an envelope from my early 20s, something Grandpa had written before he died. A letter I'd forgotten about. Inside, in his shaky handwriting, he'd written, "Hunter, I don't have much wisdom left, but if I could pass along one thing, it's this. Don't spend your life earning a seat at someone else's table. Build your own. The people who matter will come find you." I stood there for a long time after reading that. Because I hadn't just built a table. I'd built a whole life. One they couldn't take from me. And yet, part of me still felt like something was missing. Not regret. Not sadness. Just unfinished business. Because even now, I hadn't said everything I wanted to say. Not to Mom. Not to Kennedy. Not to Dad. And if I was ever going to close that chapter, I needed to go back, just once, to say what they needed to hear. And what I needed to say? It started with a random email. Nothing flashy. No subject line screaming for attention. Just, "Hunter, need a call." It was from my dad. And that alone was enough to make me pause. We hadn't talked in over 6 months. Not since the voicemail about the house being sold. I hadn't called him back, hadn't responded to the quiet updates that trickled in from relatives. I figured they'd do what they always did, move on without me, then circle back when it was convenient. But this email was different. Short. No guilt tripping. No dramatic monologue. Just a link to his Calendly and a line at the end. "I need to tell you something. If you're willing." I didn't respond right away. I let it sit in my inbox for 3 days, unopened but unread. Lila saw the tension in my shoulders every time I opened my laptop and said nothing. She never pushed, just waited. On the 4th day, I booked a call. It was awkward at first. The way old bridges are when you try to test if they'll still hold your weight. But Dad didn't waste time. After a minute of polite catching up, he dove straight in. "The house sold," he said. 2 months ago. Mom moved into that condo like she planned." "Good for her," I said flatly. He sighed. "She didn't tell you what she did with the money, did she?" I leaned forward. "What do you mean?" There was a pause. Then, with a kind of tired shame, he said, "She opened a trust account. For Kennedy. Using the house equity." I blinked. "A trust? Set up through a private firm. One of her clients recommended it. I found out last week when I got a notice from the tax office. Her name's the sole beneficiary. Kennedy's." I couldn't breathe for a second. I thought she was done. I thought the 15 grand, the secret deed change, the LA reset, that was the betrayal. But this was worse. This was permanent. "She said it was a precaution," Dad continued, bitterly. "In case Kennedy couldn't get her footing in California. Said she wanted her to have something stable. Meanwhile, I had to ask for an extension on my dental work because our backup savings are gone. I couldn't help it. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was absurd. Kennedy had a trust fund, and my father couldn't get a crown put in. Why are you telling me this? I asked, still trying to process it. He hesitated, then said something that made me sit up straighter. Because I didn't sign off on it. Legally, I was still a joint owner of the house when she did it. And if I can prove she moved the money without full consent, that trust might not be as bulletproof as she thinks. I stared at the screen. She forged your name? Maybe. Or maybe she signed for me using power of attorney. She had one from years ago when I had surgery, and I never rescinded it. Either way, it's a legal gray area. My mind spun. A legal gray area. That phrase had weight now. Possibility. Power. Dad leaned in, his voice low. I want to make this right, Hunter. But I can't do it alone. I didn't answer him that day. I told him I'd think about it. Then I sat with it for a week. And in that time, something began to take shape inside me. Not revenge, exactly. Not rage. But clarity. If they were going to keep playing games with legacy, wealth, and loyalty, then I would learn the rules. And I'd play smarter. The first thing I did was call an old friend from college, Erica. She was a lawyer now, working in estate litigation. We hadn't talked in years, but she picked up like no time had passed. When I told her the story, she whistled. That's a mess. You think there's a case? There's something. Especially if your dad still had joint ownership when the sale was processed. Trust law varies by state. But if the asset was sold under false pretenses, we might be able to contest the creation of the trust itself. At the very least, we can open discovery. That was the first spark of hope I'd felt in a long time. She helped me draft a power of attorney revocation for Dad to sign. Then we filed an informal inquiry with the county clerk's office about the deed transfer. And while we waited for paperwork, I started my own investigation. I dove into Kennedy's life like a private detective with a grudge. Her Instagram, of course, was still the same curated mirage. But I noticed something strange. The posts had slowed down. The captions had lost their sparkle. There were fewer brand tags, fewer check-ins at expensive brunch spots, more indoor selfies, more vague quotes about the power of letting go. I checked her LinkedIn, still listed as creative consultant, freelance. Then I found it. A small blog she'd started under a different name, Soul Stitch. A mix of journal entries, lifestyle posts, and cryptic rants. One entry stood out. I'm tired of being the one everyone expects to shine. Tired of playing the it girl while drowning in debt and fake smiles. I gave up everything for a shot, and now I'm invisible. My family doesn't even call anymore. It was dated 3 weeks ago. I read it twice. Then again. She was slipping. Not just financially, but emotionally. The Golden Girl routine was cracking. And I realized something important. Kennedy was vulnerable. Maybe for the first time in her life. That's when I made a decision. I would take back what was mine. Not with screaming matches. Not with revenge fantasies or ruined holidays. With precision. I worked with Erica to build a case, quietly. We filed a petition for financial mismanagement. Since Dad never consented to the trust creation, and since part of the equity used came from a jointly owned asset, we had grounds to challenge the legality of the entire structure. It was a long shot, but it didn't have to win. It just had to scare them. While the paperwork churned, I started my next move. I made contact with Kennedy. Not directly. Through a burner account. A fake email pretending to be a podcast producer interested in her story. I offered a modest appearance fee. Said I'd found her blog and wanted to interview her about what it's like to chase your dream and lose everything. She replied in 10 minutes. OMG, yes. This would be such an important convo. People need to hear this side of things. We set up a Zoom call. I didn't turn on the camera. Just asked questions. She talked for an hour. Told me about how the agency ghosted her. How her roommates skipped town and left her with the lease. How she had to Uber Eats and sell old handbags just to get by. She said her mom used to send her money but had tightened up recently, and now she felt abandoned. I don't even know if the trust is still mine, she said. She said it's protected, but mom's been cagey. Won't let me see the docs. Bingo. Kennedy didn't have the money. She just thought she did. That trust wasn't a gift, it was a leash. A leash mom controlled, which meant they were already turning on each other. I ended the call with a fake email address and no intention to follow up. But I saved the recording. Every word. Every second. Later that week, Erica sent me an update. The inquiry had triggered a response. Mom's legal firm had acknowledged receipt. No denial yet. No pushback, which meant they were nervous. I sent one final letter. No signature. No return address. Just typed and mailed to the condo address I knew she'd moved to. I know about the trust. I know what you did to Dad. I know Kennedy doesn't have access to the money. You can either undo what you built quietly, or you can watch it crumble in public. Your move. No threats. No demands. Just truth. I don't know how she reacted. She didn't reply. But 2 weeks later, I got a text from Dad. She wants to talk. Said she's reevaluating some things. Might be time to come home. I didn't respond. Not yet. Because I wasn't done. The pieces were moving. The board was set. And this time, I was the one with the upper hand. I didn't go back right away, not physically. When Dad texted me about Mom reevaluating some things, I knew what that meant. She wasn't sorry. She was calculating. She felt the walls closing in and was trying to rearrange the furniture before the house collapsed. That wasn't accountability. That was desperation in pearls and a pressed blouse. So I waited. I let her sit in the uncertainty for a little while longer. Then I sent an email, short, polite, surgical. If she wants to talk, it needs to be in writing. I'm no longer taking meetings where the goal is emotional manipulation disguised as closure. Dad didn't push back. I think he understood now. Maybe too late. But he understood. 3 days later, I got an email from Mom. She opened with a classic. I'm sorry if I made you feel excluded. There it was, the conditional apology. The politician's favorite. I skimmed through paragraphs of flowery justifications, phrases like, intentions were never malicious, and I just wanted to protect both of you in different ways. And then came the real reason she reached out. I've spoken with the attorney, and we're open to dissolving the trust structure. Kennedy isn't in a position to manage it responsibly, and with your father's concerns now raised, it seems best to revert things. There it was. Panic. She wasn't dissolving it because she saw the light. She was dissolving it because we had her cornered. Because Erica had started the process of filing for financial misconduct on Dad's behalf, and Mom knew that even if she didn't lose, the discovery alone would drag her name through every dusty filing cabinet and leave a mark on her record. I replied, send me the documentation showing it's been dissolved. Once I verify it, we'll consider next steps. No conversations until then. It took a week, but the documents came through. I forwarded them to Erica, who confirmed the trust had been shut down. The funds had been transferred back into the estate's general holding account, and since Dad had finally revoked her lingering power of attorney, she couldn't touch a cent without his co-signature. We'd frozen her. She still had money, sure, but not control, not like before. And Kennedy? She had no idea, because while all this was happening, she'd been busy crafting her latest rebrand. I knew, because I'd been watching. She'd recently launched a healing and empowerment Patreon. A few dozen subscribers, vague promises of monthly meditations, and behind-the-scenes looks at her creative journey. The same week she posted a day in my life video on YouTube, where she cried softly on camera about growing pains and toxic family dynamics. I recognized one of the quotes. It was from my letter to Mom. Verbatim. I was angry, sure, but not surprised. What did surprise me was the GoFundMe, titled, Help Me Rebuild After LA Chewed Me Up. She wrote that she was restarting from zero, that she'd been cut off from her family because she refused to follow a path that wasn't hers. That all she wanted was a chance to move back home and start over. Maybe open a boutique wellness studio, if the universe aligned. The donation goal? $20,000. And the best part? The first donation was from Mom. $2,500. With the message, so proud of your strength. We've got you always. I almost dropped my coffee when I saw it. After all that, after dissolving the trust, agreeing to stop the bleeding, she found a new funnel. Public, emotional, manipulative, with the added bonus of making me look like the villain for cutting ties. And that's when I decided, no more mercy. If they wanted to play this publicly, so be it. But we were going to do it my way. Step 1 was quiet. Legal. Erica helped Dad file a cease and desist against the GoFundMe, citing misrepresentation. Since Kennedy had claimed to be cut off, but had simultaneously received funds from a parent, who was not the sole financial decision-maker, there were grounds to argue the campaign was built on false pretenses. Within 2 days, the platform flagged it for review. Donations were paused. Comments were locked. Kennedy took to Instagram with a cryptic story. It's always your own people. But nothing can stop what's meant for me. Step 2 was information. I anonymously leaked the podcast interview to a small Reddit forum focused on influencer accountability. I didn't doctor it. I didn't edit it. I just posted the full call with the caption, "Wellness coach asks for $20K after telling podcast she was blowing through cash, hiding from landlords, and admitted her trust was probably fake." It blew up. Not viral, but big enough. Someone recognized her from her YouTube channel. Screenshots surfaced. A few former roommates chimed in. One shared DMs where Kennedy asked to borrow money and then ghosted them after receiving it. Her name trended on a niche TikTok algorithm for a few days under the tag #manifestation myths. She posted another video, tearful, vague, claiming she was being targeted by trolls and that certain people were trying to erase her voice. The comments weren't buying it. Even her Patreon started bleeding subscribers. And me? I was sipping tea in a hoodie in Portland, watching it all from the comfort of my laptop. Step 3 was direct. Dad invited me down for a visit. Said he had something he wanted me to see. I agreed. I drove back for the first time in over a year. The neighborhood looked smaller, quieter, like someone had dimmed the saturation. We met at a diner. Same one we used to go to when I was a kid. He slid a manila folder across the table. Inside were the finalized estate papers. The house proceeds, now sitting in escrow, were being equally split, 50-50, between me and Kennedy. That was always how it should have been. She doesn't know yet, he said. But it's done. No more secret favors. No more backdoors. I nodded. And if she contests it? He smiled for the first time that day. She won't get far. She burned every bridge she had, including mine. We didn't talk much after that. Just drank coffee. Watched the rain. Before I left town, I took one final detour. Mom's condo. I didn't plan to go in. Didn't even know if she'd be there. But I stood on the sidewalk and looked up at the balcony where she used to hang flower pots. The pots were gone now. Just an empty railing. After a minute, I slipped a letter into her mailbox. It was shorter than the last one. Just one paragraph. You tried to protect the wrong daughter. You taught her she didn't need to earn love, only demand it. That choices had no consequences, and family was a resource to extract from, not a bond to nurture. You didn't break me, but you lost me, and now you'll have to live with that. I drove away without looking back. A few weeks later, I got a message from Kennedy. Just 2 words. You win. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, because I didn't need to. Winning wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about applause. It was about peace, and I'd finally found it. Fallout wasn't loud. It wasn't fireworks or slammed doors or viral courtroom footage. It was slow, quiet, heavy, like snow that piles up inch by inch until the roof caves in. And when it came, it didn't just crack the image of my family. It erased it. Kennedy's final text, "You win," arrived like a broken transmission from someone who used to speak in sparkles and emojis. No follow-up, no calls, no tears, just silence. At first, I thought it was another manipulation tactic, the calm before a second storm. But then Dad called a few days later and confirmed what I suspected. She's gone quiet, he said. No calls, no emails, no drama. I think she finally hit the wall. I didn't gloat, didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. But the world didn't stop turning. The fallout began with Kennedy's reputation. The leaked podcast kept circulating on niche forums, passed around in YouTube commentary videos, and stitched TikToks. A creator with a modest following made a reaction video dissecting the discrepancies in Kennedy's stories, contrasting her tearful pleas with screenshots of designer spa visits and expensive sushi nights. Viewers were not kind. Her Patreon dropped to under 20 subscribers within a month. The GoFundMe was permanently removed. Some former donors demanded refunds. Others blasted her in the comments of her remaining YouTube videos, which she eventually turned off. Then her wellness Instagram vanished. Just like that. Gone. She resurfaced briefly under a new handle, less curated, more personal, but it never gained traction. Without the shiny filter of trust-funded luxury, the audience didn't stick around. There were no more partnerships, no affiliate links, no promos for crystal diffusers or energy resetting water bottles. Her final post, at least the last one I ever saw, was a blurry photo of a sunset with a caption that read, "Some chapters aren't meant to be reread. Thank you for the lesson." And then she disappeared. Dad told me she moved into a shared apartment outside Sacramento, working part-time as a barista. Back to basics. No more freelance creative consultant titles. No more LA lights. Just reality. It wasn't punishment. It was life. Unfiltered. Unsubsidized. Mom, though? Mom didn't vanish. She couldn't. She still lived in the same condo. Still attended the same church. Still hosted book club with the same polite smiles and low-fat lemon bars. But the whispers started. First from her friends. After the trust documents were quietly contested, word spread among her social circles. Then from her clients, some of whom dropped her after seeing her name pop up in a quiet legal dispute over misused estate funds. Nothing criminal. Nothing headline-grabbing. Just shame. The soft kind. The kind that lingers in looks and polite distance. Dad and I spoke more often now. He came up to Portland twice that year. We grilled salmon on my small balcony, talked about nothing in particular, and played cribbage like we used to. I helped him set up an online dating profile once, just for fun. He didn't follow through with it, but I could tell he was grateful for the gesture. You know, he said once, looking out at the skyline. I used to think keeping the peace meant keeping quiet. I nodded. Me too. We didn't talk about Mom much after that. The estate was finalized a few months later. The proceeds from the house were split down the middle. I donated some of my share to a scholarship fund in Grandpa's name. The rest, I used to invest in the software company I co-founded. We hired 2 more employees that summer and signed a contract with a logistics firm in Seattle. And one evening, while updating payroll, I saw my bank account balance and smiled. Not because of the number, but because I earned every single digit of it. No shortcuts, no strings, just work, boundaries, and rebuilding. Lila and I got engaged the following spring. She proposed. On a rainy trail overlooking the Columbia River Gorge, she pulled out a tiny ceramic ring box and said, "You've been walking alone for too long. Want to keep walking, but together?" I cried. Then I laughed through the tears. Said yes before she even opened the box. Our wedding was small. Just friends, her family, and Dad. No drama. No table flipping. Just laughter, good wine, and a playlist we made together. I didn't invite Mom. Not out of spite, but because you don't invite arsonists to your rebuilding ceremony. That night, as Lila and I danced under a string of patio lights, I remembered something Grandpa used to say. Sometimes, the loudest peace comes after the quietest goodbye. He was right. Letting go didn't feel like a loss anymore. It felt like freedom. I stood in the middle of everything I built, my friends, my work, my wife, and realized this wasn't the ending of a painful story. It was the beginning of a life no longer written by other people's expectations. A few weeks later, I got one last letter from Mom. No return address. Just her handwriting on the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. I thought you'd change your mind by now. I thought you'd miss us. I never realized the only person who needed to change was me. I'm sorry. I mean it. But I know it's too late. She signed it with her full name. Not Mom. Just Eleanor. I read it once. Then I set it down. Didn't burn it. Didn't shred it. Just left it on the shelf. A relic. A footnote. Not the ending. Not anymore. Because I'm the one writing the story now. I'm 33 years old, and my name is Adam. If you'd asked me a few years ago what kind of man I wanted to be, I would have said generous, supportive, someone the family could count on. I never imagined that trying to be that person would turn me into something else entirely, someone invisible, taken for granted, and, eventually, someone vengeful. My mother was turning 60, and the whole thing had been planned for months. A big rented venue, catered food, live music, flowers, decorations, the works. You'd think it was a wedding. My sister, Claire, took the reins on organizing it, but only in name. In reality, most of the planning was outsourced to me, as usual. Adam, can you just put the deposit down for now? You're better with the bakery than me. Can you just talk to them directly? Oh, and send the down payment for the band before Friday, please. It always started as just this one thing, and always ended with my bank account bleeding dry in the name of being a good son. I never complained out loud. Maybe I should have. But I guess I kept thinking that if I gave enough money, time, presents, they'd finally start to see me. Not as the divorced one, not as the guy who works too much, not as the quiet one. Just as part of the family. But that night shattered any illusions I still had. The party was set to start at 7 p.m. I showed up a little early, carrying the cake myself, 2 tiers, vanilla bean with raspberry filling, handmade sugar flowers that matched Mom's favorite roses. I'd gone all out. It was the one part of the event I actually felt proud of. Walking in, I was barely through the door before I heard Claire's voice slice through the buzz of conversation like a sneer in stereo. "Oh look," she said, not even trying to lower her voice. The family wallet finally showed up. There was laughter. Actual laughter. My Uncle Jeff, half drunk already with his second gin and tonic in hand, clinked his glass and added, "To the child who gives the most but matters the least." I froze. Cake box in my hands, smile frozen mid-hello. My cheeks burned. I think I said something like, "Hey," but it came out quieter than I meant. I scanned the crowd. Nobody looked uncomfortable. No one stepped in. They were all just smiling like it was some inside joke they'd all been in on for years. Even Mom. She stood in her burgundy dress, pearls around her neck, a matching smile plastered across her face. "Don't make a scene," she said softly as I approached. "It's my day." That did something to me. Something I didn't expect. It was like watching a bridge you didn't know you were standing on burn down in real time. I didn't respond. I didn't even put the cake on the table. I walked straight past the decorations, past the overpriced photographer snapping candids of everyone else's joy, and made my way to the reception desk. The manager looked up. "Name?" she asked. I slid an envelope across the counter. "Adam Sterling. The balance for the venue's in here." She opened it and nodded, about to thank me, but I held up a hand. "Change of plans," I said. "That balance? I want it canceled. Every check inside that envelope? I need them returned to me." Immediately. Her eyebrows lifted. "Sir, the event is currently in progress." "I understand," I said. "But you haven't deposited anything yet, right?" "No, but..." "Then rip them up." She hesitated, but something in my face must have made her realize I wasn't bluffing. "I'll talk to the owner," she said quickly. "He's here tonight. Wait here." I didn't. I turned around and walked out the front door without another word. I didn't go far, just across the street, where my car was parked facing the entrance. I sat there for a while, engine off, just watching people dance through the tall windows, hearing the faint thump of the bass line, trying to steady the shaking in my hands. Was it petty? Probably. Was it impulsive? Maybe. But was it deserved? I kept hearing Jeff's voice. Gives the most, but matters the least. And then, like a slow wave, the implications started washing over me. The photographer? I paid for that. The caterer? I'd split the cost with Claire, except I paid her half too. The musicians? I'd been the one to sign the contract. The florist? The decorations? The champagne? They hadn't just mocked me. They built a monument to my generosity and stood on top of it to laugh in my face. It was around 8:15 when I noticed the venue lights flicker once. Then again. A third time. And then they went dark completely. Music cut out mid-verse. I saw silhouettes near the windows begin to fidget, shadows moving fast across the walls as people pulled out their phones, gesturing toward the ceiling and to each other. Someone must have gone to the DJ, or the band, or the coordinator, maybe to the staff. And then someone else must have asked to speak to the manager. The panic didn't happen all at once. It built slowly, like heat under a sealed lid. The music didn't come back on. The power didn't reset. Waiters started pulling trays back into the kitchen. Lights still off. One by one, guests began drifting toward the entrance, confused. My phone buzzed. First from Claire. Then from Mom. Then Jeff. Each message started the same way. "Hey, Adam, are you still here? We think there's a problem, or the venue says they didn't get the full payment. Or this has to be a mistake, right?" I didn't answer. Instead, I leaned back in my seat and just watched. People streamed out in clumps. Some in heels, some barefoot from dancing, others carrying their coats or half-full glasses of drinks. The birthday girl came last, flanked by Jeff and Claire, arguing with the venue manager just inside the front doors. She was gesturing wildly, pointing back toward the dimmed reception room like it owed her something. My mother's voice, even from across the street, carried. "Where's my son? He's the one who handled this." I stayed in the car a while longer after they all spilled into the parking lot, pacing, arguing, staring at their phones like one of them held the magic button to rewind the night. Mom kept trying to call me. So did Claire. Eventually, they stopped calling and just started texting. "Claire, what is going on, Adam? The venue said you canceled. Fix this now." "Mom, I don't know what you're trying to prove, but this was supposed to be my special night." "Jeff, you better get your butt back here and explain yourself." I read every word. Didn't respond. At 9:27 p.m., I turned my phone off and drove home. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because something had shifted in me. It was like I'd finally opened a door I'd spent my whole life pretending didn't exist. A door labeled enough. The next morning, I woke up and started writing. Not texts, not emails. Letters. Real ones. I pulled out my checkbook and my calendar. I logged into every account I'd quietly used to support my family over the last several years and started listing them out. $1,200 monthly to mom's rent. $400 monthly to Claire's son's daycare. $300 to Jeff's credit card debt. $250 to cover utilities at mom's during winter. $8,000 for Claire's wedding dress 2 years ago. $15,000 loan to Jeff he never paid back. All the deposits I'd put down for the party, even the ones I hadn't canceled in time. Then I tallied the total. Just north of $94,000. $94,000 over the last 6 years. Quietly. Without complaint. Without acknowledgement. I don't make millions. I'm a systems analyst at a mid-size firm. I live modestly. No vacations. No luxury car. I rent instead of own. My life was lean because I had been supporting them. I printed out the list and made 3 copies. Then I drafted a formal letter. It wasn't spiteful or dramatic, just the truth. I explained that effective immediately, I would no longer be providing financial support to any member of the family. I wasn't angry, I wrote. But I was done. Done being taken for granted. Done being laughed at while funding the very things they celebrated. Done being the wallet. I folded the letters, attached a copy of the financial breakdown to each, and mailed them, one to Mom, one to Claire, one to Uncle Jeff. Certified, with receipts. And then, for the first time in a long time, I took myself out for breakfast. Sat alone. Ordered eggs Benedict and fresh orange juice. Tipped the waitress 40%. By the next day, my phone was back to buzzing. I turned it on that morning and watched the notifications roll in like waves. Claire texted, "Seriously? You're cutting off my daycare money over a joke?" Mom texted, "How dare you humiliate me at my own birthday and then send a list like I'm some charity case?" Jeff texted, "This is low, even for you." Low? I hadn't even started. Because the second step of my plan wasn't just cutting off the money. It was exposing the ugly truth they all tried to keep under wraps. They depended on me. And without me, the scaffolding of their lives started to crack. Claire's daycare stopped accepting her late payments. She called in a panic 2 weeks later, begging me to just cover it until she figured something out. Jeff's landlord started sending final notices. I knew because I used to receive them on his behalf. And Mom? Mom finally had to face her landlord herself for the first time in years. Apparently, she told him I'd always pay by the 5th. When I didn't, she got the notice I used to intercept. But the moment that really brought it home? 2 weeks after the birthday party, I got a call from the venue manager. He said someone claiming to be my assistant had tried to rebook the party space using my name and discount code. The card declined. The name on it was Claire. They still thought I might fix it. That's when I decided to take it even further. See, I hadn't just been paying for their lifestyles. I'd been documenting it. Every Venmo transfer, every bank statement, every email. I had a paper trail. Not because I planned to use it. At least, not until now. So I put it together. A Google Drive folder, neatly sorted. Rent payments, Mom. Childcare, Claire. Credit transfers, Jeff. Party expenses breakdown. Unpaid loans. Then I shared the folder with the entire extended family. Aunts, cousins, even my grandmother. With it, I wrote a simple message. I'm stepping away from the family for a while. I don't want apologies. I want accountability. If you ever wondered why I seemed distant or tired or disconnected, it's because I've spent years being laughed at by the people I was quietly saving. I'm done. I wish you all well. That's it. No drama. No insults. Just truth. The fallout was nuclear. Some of my cousins reached out immediately shocked, horrified, apologetic. One of them said, "I thought you were just the quiet one. I had no idea you were the one holding everything together." But from Mom? Nothing. Radio silence. For 3 days. Then, a text. "I hope you're happy. The family's falling apart." I stared at it for a long time. Then I wrote back. Maybe it needed to. And I left it at that. Because this wasn't revenge, not really. It was release. A slow, calculated dismantling of the pedestal they built on my back. But I wasn't done yet. Because I just received an invitation, one they assumed I'd ignore. A new family dinner. Hosted by Jeff. Labeled, a fresh start. I didn't respond right away to Jeff's invitation. The invite sat in my inbox for 2 full days, blinking unread like a dare. Titled Family Reset Dinner, Jeff's Place, Sunday, 6 p.m. The message beneath was short, almost suspiciously so. Let's clear the air and start over. No drama. Just family. It didn't mention the birthday disaster. Didn't reference the folder. Didn't include an apology or even my name. Just family. Still, I RSVP'd yes. Not because I wanted closure. I'd already made peace with stepping back. But something told me this wasn't a dinner, it was a performance. And I wanted a front row seat. Or, more accurately, I wanted to bring my own spotlight. Sunday came, and I dressed in dark jeans and a button-up, nothing flashy, but clean, crisp, composed. I arrived exactly at 6 p.m. Not early, not late. Just on time enough to let them know I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. Jeff's house was already crowded. I recognized most of the faces, extended cousins, family friends, the ones who floated around during holidays, always orbiting the real power players, Mom, Jeff, Claire. They were clustered in the living room, drinks in hand, pretending to laugh at jokes while glancing sideways to see who was speaking. When I stepped in, a few people turned and froze. Others gave that awkward half-smile reserved for people you've heard about but haven't spoken to yet. Claire was by the kitchen island, pouring herself a drink. She looked up, surprised. "You actually came," she said flatly. I nodded. "You invited me." She huffed a small laugh. "Yeah, I just didn't think you'd show your face." "You mean after being called the family wallet and having my entire existence mocked at a party I paid for?" Her eyes narrowed. "It was a joke." "Then why didn't anyone laugh until I left?" She didn't answer, just sipped her drink and turned away. I made my way through the house slowly, like I was just another guest. I said hi to a few people who greeted me with tentative smiles. But mostly, I watched. Jeff was playing host now, clapping backs, refilling glasses, trying to control the energy of the room like a cheap game show host. At 6:20, Mom arrived. Her entrance was calculated, as always. Designer scarf, oversized sunglasses despite the sun setting, a soft-lipped smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She walked straight past me, offering a cool nod that landed somewhere between hello and "you ruined my birthday." No hug. No words. Dinner was announced shortly after. Long table, buffet style, with everyone seated tight to accommodate the crowd. I took a seat toward the middle, visible, but not central. Jeff stood at the head. "Before we eat," he began, lifting his glass, "I just want to say thank you to everyone who came. It's been a rough couple of weeks, but I think we can all agree family is family. And no matter what's happened, we're stronger together." A few scattered claps. Some polite nods. Claire smirked. Then Jeff added, "And I think we all owe Adam an apology for how things went down." The room quieted. My heart thudded, but not from emotion, from suspicion. "Adam," Jeff continued, "I know the party didn't go the way you hoped, but we've all had time to reflect, and I think we're ready to move forward. Right?" He looked at me. Everyone looked at me. I glanced down the table. My mother was picking lint off her napkin. Claire was scrolling her phone beneath the tablecloth. I waited, counted to 5 in my head. "Do you really want to move forward?" I asked, calmly. "Or do you just want the bank back open?" Jeff blinked. "That's not fair." "No." I turned to the room. "Because for the last 6 years, I've covered rent, bills, daycare, parties, trips, and debts. I've been told to stop making scenes, to be grateful I'm even included. And when I finally said no, when I stepped away, you threw a party about it, and then called me dramatic." No one spoke. I stood up slowly, reaching into my coat. From the inside pocket, I pulled out a small envelope and placed it gently in the center of the table. Everyone watched. "It's not money," I said. "It's the deed to Mom's condo." Her head snapped up. "I bought it outright 2 years ago. Had the title transferred into a trust. It's been under my name ever since." Claire's glass froze midair. "Don't worry," I said to Mom. "You can stay there. I've signed it over to you, effective immediately. You won't owe me anything. Ever again." I turned to Jeff. "Your credit cards? I've canceled every authorized user slot with my name on them. You'll have to make your own payments now." He opened his mouth, but I wasn't done. "And Claire," I said, voice steady, "your son's daycare? I prepaid the next 2 months. After that, it's on you." I looked at each of them. I didn't come here to fight. I came to return everything. "You say you want a fresh start? Good. Here it is." I could feel the table shift, like gravity had changed. Mom looked pale. Jeff was visibly sweating. Claire's jaw had gone tight, like she was holding back a retort she didn't quite have the words for. And still, no one apologized. Not really. They didn't ask why I did it, or how it had gotten this far. They just sat there, stunned, processing the new terms of engagement like chess players realizing they'd lost a queen 3 moves ago. I slid my chair back. "I hope you enjoy dinner," I said. "It'll probably taste better now that you paid for it yourselves." And with that, I walked out. But I didn't leave town, because one person hadn't reached out through all this. Someone I hadn't heard from in years. Someone who used to call me her favorite. My cousin Madison. The only one who disappeared when things got bad. But last week, she texted me. And her message was only 5 words long. They did it to me too. Madison's message hit me like a quiet echo of my own story. I hadn't seen her since my late 20s, maybe a few awkward holidays after that. But she used to be the only one at family gatherings who'd sit beside me when no one else did. She was a few years younger, but sharp, observant. Too smart to stay around. I never knew why she'd vanished. Just chalked it up to her moving out of state for school, then job stuff, maybe life getting in the way. Turns out, I wasn't entirely wrong, but I hadn't known the whole story. I texted her back that night. "Let's talk." She responded immediately. We met at a small cafe downtown the next morning. She was already there when I arrived, sitting with a tea in front of her, notebook open like she'd been waiting for this conversation for a long time. She stood and hugged me. Not the kind of hug people give out of obligation, but the kind that says finally. We sat, ordered coffee, and before I could even ask, she opened her notebook and started flipping through. "I've been keeping track," she said. "Not for revenge, just for clarity." And she showed me everything. It turned out Madison had been in a very similar position to mine, except younger and far more exploited emotionally. When she landed a tech internship out of college, she'd moved back in with Aunt Karen, who, of course, charged her rent. Not market rent, double market rent. Karen claimed it was teaching her responsibility. But Madison also paid for her cousin's school supplies, groceries for the house, and even helped Aunt Karen start a failing Etsy business that never took off. And when Madison finally got her own place, the family ghosted her. Birthday invitations stopped coming. Group chats she was once part of mysteriously vanished. She'd been written off as selfish because she stopped being useful. She hadn't talked to Claire in years. Jeff had once hit her up for money, and when she said no, he replied with just 3 words. Wow. Cold-blooded. I was stunned, but not surprised. I told her everything. About the party, the cake, the venue, the folder I'd sent out, the final confrontation at the dinner. Madison laughed when I mentioned the deed to Mom's condo. "You always were too generous," she said. "But I'm glad you stopped." We talked for 2 hours. And by the end of it, we agreed on one thing. We weren't going to wait around anymore for apologies that were never coming. So we made a plan. Not for vengeance. For peace. We decided to reclaim the word family. Not the version we'd been sold growing up. The guilt-tripping, money-leeching, hierarchy-driven power play that masqueraded as love. But the real kind. The kind we could build. Chosen. Earned. Together, we started small. Sunday dinners. Just the 2 of us at first. Then we invited a few others. Cousins who'd quietly reached out after I sent the folder. People who'd felt the cold shoulder of our family's favoritism and entitlement. One of Jeff's older daughters, who had moved out at 18 and hadn't spoken to him in years, showed up one night with drinks and a story that made my jaw drop. Little by little, we formed a new circle. One built not on guilt or obligation, but mutual respect. No one asked for money. No one made jabs. It was peaceful, warm. But things weren't as quiet on the other side. I started hearing through mutual acquaintances that the original family circle wasn't handling the fallout well. Jeff had his credit cards closed. Apparently, he hadn't realized how bad his debt was without someone patching the holes. Collection notices started piling up. He sold his car 6 months later. Last I heard, he moved back in with a friend from high school. Claire tried launching a mompreneur podcast. It never took off. Without the daycare covered, she had to reduce her hours at work, and eventually, she started borrowing money from a new boyfriend, until he found out and dumped her. She moved back in with Mom shortly after. And Mom, she tried to save face for a while, through a couple small gatherings. Told everyone she'd canceled the birthday party on purpose. But the story didn't hold. Too many people knew. And once the folder had made its rounds, people started quietly stepping away. The truth had a way of sticking. Eventually, she sent me a letter. Handwritten. Short. I didn't realize how much I hurt you. I see it now. I won't ask you to forgive me, but I am sorry. For everything. It was the closest thing to a real apology I'd ever gotten from her. I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because it didn't need a reply. I'd already moved on. She wasn't asking for anything. Just acknowledging what had happened. That was enough. For once. It's been a year now. My Sundays are spent cooking, laughing, playing board games with people who see me. Not for what I give, but for who I am. Madison and I are closer than ever. She recently got engaged and asked me to officiate. I said yes without hesitation. The original group, the ones who toasted to the child who gives the most but matters the least, they don't call anymore. Don't write. The silence, once bitter, now feels like a blessing. And that cake? The one I set down at the party and left behind? I went back to that bakery a few weeks later. Ordered the exact same one. 2 tiers. Vanilla bean. Raspberry filling. Sugar flowers. This time, I brought it to our new family dinner. We sang. We laughed. We made a toast. To the people who matter and the peace we built ourselves. And as I watched everyone dig in, I realized I hadn't lost a family that night. I'd finally found one.